told a convincing story. The problem is that story unravels as soon as you start to look at the content. And just to take two examples, the country is facing two major crises at the moment. One is public health, one is climate change. And yet this budget cut taxes on air travel and cut taxes on alcohol. It sort of beggars belief, let alone in the week before COP. And then just to take the second example, both the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and the Prime Minister have talked about a high pay economy. They've repeated this phrase again and again. If you look into the numbers, I was doing this afternoon that the OBR have published, by high wage economy, what they mean is get back to 2008 levels of pay at some point in the second half of this decade. That's all we're talking about. Pay getting back to 2008 levels at some point in the second half of this decade. That isn't the vision, I think, that most people think they voted for.
Benjamin Loughnane, I'm wondering whether this is a budget that pleases no one.
Yes, it strikes me more as a budget that was written by a PR team than by a chancellor. It's a budget which is designed to sound very good and be very popular to what the government thinks the people of this country really want. So slashing tax on things like pints and Prosecco is, I think, what the government thinks people want to hear. But really what they want to hear is low tax and the opportunity to go out and earn good money and buy a house and live a good life where you're able to be prosperous. But fundamentally, the real budget was 2 weeks ago when we had all of these tax rises and all these hikes to pay for the past 2 years of lockdown and economic ruin that we have suffered. And many of us, certainly people of my generation, will look at things like the furlough scheme, which we are going to spend the rest of our lives paying for despite not taking a penny of, and think maybe this budget isn't all that it is proclaimed to be.
But surely, Benjamin, this is fiscal prudence. The bottom line is that borrowing is at a record high, and the Chancellor is serious about balancing the books. And that's the point at which, as Sir Geoffrey suggested, that you cut taxes, but not now. It would be irresponsible now, Benjamin.
Sure, but it reads more to me like a Labour budget rather than a Conservative one. It might be very popular, it might sound very good, but I don't think it's actually...
Well, I think it will be popular that the Chancellor and the government are being careful about the health of the economy, the finances of the nation, Benjamin. We can't borrow forever. And if we had tax cuts now, you'd have to borrow to deliver those.
Sure, but it also comes with an extraordinarily high tax burden. We are, at the end of the day, paying for this, and we want to get our money's worth.
Oh, well, there you go. That's a good question. Peter Edwards, a journalist and former...
Can I just make a point?
Go on, Sir Geoffrey.
Mark, can I just make a point?
Go for it.
We've had an extraordinary economic shock, Benjamin. We've had to spend £400 billion on dealing with the COVID. Nobody wanted that. To say we're in economic ruin is I mean, the Chancellor didn't want that. We have to deal with the situation as it is, not the situation we would like it to be. And a responsible Chancellor carrying out the furlough scheme, which you criticise so much, we were predicting a huge wave of unemployment. Actually, the furlough scheme has protected all those jobs, and thank goodness, now we have some really good employment figures. We have a lot of vacancies in the employment market. So the economy has been protected. It's now growing faster than we ever expected it would.
OK, I want to inject some realism into this. It's time for some realism. Today was a mixture of incompetence and ideology, and it just doesn't work. It's incompetent because the national debt is rising this year, it's rising next year, it's rising the year after that. If we're lucky, if the government economy get a fair wind, it might start to come down a bit, but who knows? And it was a mixture of ideology because I heard people talk about tax cuts. The biggest and most notable tax cut today is for the banks. We've had this enormous squeeze on living standards, an economic and health shock. We've been told we're going to have inflation of up to 5%, a bigger cost of living crisis than the one in the Ed Miliband, David Cameron era. In response to that is to cut the taxes for the banks. And everything we've heard about, is this more borrowing? Is this left-wing? Borrowing is not left-wing. And what we've actually seen today is incoherence, where there's an attempt to partially row back from the previous Tory failures. They scrapped the universal credit uplift and have done some tweaks to universal credit today. We had 10 years of undermining the NHS financially and rhetorically, and we had some money for the NHS. We had savage cuts to the court service. Remember, if you're a victim of crime or in a legal and financial dispute, you've already suffered from that.
Peter,
and the pittance is going into the courts now is too late. These are half
that really is
too late.
That really is absolute
Geoffrey?
nonsense. That really is absolute nonsense. The only way you can actually spend more money in the public sector is to grow the economy. And the OBR have said that the economy is going to grow at 6% from the beginning of next year. And that's advanced from the spring. They also say it's going to grow at 60% next year as well. These are some of the fastest growth figures we've seen in this country since the war.
Why is the debt going up?
So, I mean, actually... Sorry.
Why is the debt going up then? Why is the debt going up? If the Tories are bringing a turnaround...
Because of this cycle...
Why is
because as Mark has already said, you've asked me a question, please let me answer it. This cycle in the economy, the necessity is to support the public sector, to put more money into the health service, to reduce the backlog, to put more money into education, to make sure that people have skills and the education to catch up through the COVID. This is necessary at this stage in the cycle. But the Chancellor's made it very clear that he wants to bring the debt down, because if we get another economic shock, we need to be in a better position than we are now. But we have to deal, as I've said to Benjamin before, we have to deal with the situation as it is, not as we would like it to be. You can't spend, and I repeat again, 400 billion on the COVID and then still carry on as if nothing had happened.
Peter, you can't tell me. Peter, you can't tell me that borrowing would be lower under Labour.
Things would have been very different under Labour, because first of all, we wouldn't have had 10 years of austerity. No, let me answer.
More lockdowns, more borrowing, a bigger deficit, financial ruin.
Park lockdowns. I think you're a bit obsessed with lockdowns. Let's talk about what's happening today.
Because we've just received the bill, £400 billion, one of the highest COVID death rates in the world. Wasted money.
Exactly. You're contradicting yourself then, because you're saying you're anti-lockdown and we've got one of the highest death rates in the world. So you can't have both those criticisms, because they mean different things. Let's go back to the point about debt.
The lockdowns did not have the desired effect. We did not get the bang for our buck.
Let's talk about the budget, because I'm very happy to talk about lockdowns, but I suspect viewers have heard it many times already. So Geoffrey said earlier...
It was the lockdown budget.
Hold on. What the reality is, we're going to be having lockdown budgets for the next decade because of their impacts on the public finances of the health crisis. So Geoffrey said earlier, he used the phrase paying down debt. There has been no debt paid down. The debt is going up this year. The debt is going up next year. The debt is going up year after that. We have to be honest about that.
But that's lower than it would have been under Labour, who want to give everyone a pay rise and who have said today, Peter, that it's not enough cash.
Well, I don't think it is enough, but Labour would have grown the economy. Labour would have grown the economy. So first of all, remember, David Cameron and George Osborne pulled the rug from under the economy again and again and again and again and again.
You an archaeologist, where did you find
Peter,
those names from? That was a decade ago. So, Geoffrey?
So what would you have actually cut out of that £400 billion spending during COVID? Would you have cut out the furlough? Would you have cut out the various business loans to support businesses? Would you have cut out the extra spending for the health service? What would you have actually cut out? What did we spend this £400 billion on that you wouldn't have spent it on?
Geoffrey, I think you're digging yourself into a slightly bigger hole ideologically. I haven't suggested that we would have cut the furlough spending. I think furlough was a good thing, although it was a blunt instrument. Labour would have grown the economy.
And the loans to business? And the loans to business? To support businesses going bust? What about
Geoffrey, that? I think you're looking for an enemy, but you won't find one in me.
No, I'm not.
Labour has not called for less support for business.
Alfie Sterling.
Okay, but it's the wrong question. It's the wrong question. Could the Tories have done more to boost economic growth, either in the last decade or in the last year? And the obvious answer is yes. Should the Tories now, as we hope we start to come out of the pandemic, be cutting tax for the largest banks in Britain? Yes or no?
Alfie Sterling, what does
that's
your...
actually the
what
case.
does your...
I'm going to look at my notes while Alfie's talking.
You do,
I don't
Geoffrey,
think the Chancellor did cut the tax for the banks.
So, Geoffrey, you check the numbers whilst I speak to Alfie and ask you, Alfie, does your Does your dream budget, your fantasy budget, differ strongly from what you've heard today? Because this could have been a budget from a Labour Chancellor.
Well, this certainly wasn't the worst budget that I've seen, and I was actually expecting a lot worse. I was expecting one closer mark to what your intro set out, one which was more worried about inflation and chasing the shadows of debt, which is actually at record low financing costs. And actually, we didn't see that. But my dream budget, to use your word, probably wouldn't. I don't often dream about budgets, but I guess I have to confess sometimes maybe I do. But my dream budget would be one that restores living standards, right? That one that repairs the long-term scarring to income, earnings, cost of living for this country. And this budget hasn't done that.
Alfie,
if you look
what
at
about the
US,
economy? What about GDP? What about national income? Surely that's the priority. And then everyone wins.
We're speaking the same language. It's one and the same. I'm talking about GDP, but I'm talking about the distribution thereof. So not just the aggregate.
Borrowing money on the international bond markets to give everyone in the public sector a pay rise.
So I think it's quite important we bring some economics into this discussion, because we've talked about things like furlough being paid off in generations' time and the cost of pandemic. If you don't address a public health crisis, it destroys your economy. Okay, there is no trade-off there. You need to address a public health crisis in order to restore your economy. If you pay for something like furlough, and I find myself agreeing with Jeffrey here, if you find yourself paying a furlough to keep people in employment, that pays for itself in months, not years, not decades, within months. And that modelling is being done by the National Institute for Social and Economic Research. So we're not talking about these sorts of trade-offs. We're talking about basic economics, where if you keep people in work, that pays for itself in the future because you get tax receipts that you would not otherwise have had. That applies for other successful government investment programs. And right now, if you compare, say, the UK with the United States, the UK put in about 25 billion extra from this budget to try and repair the long-term scarring from COVID. If we'd been on a par with the US, it would have been closer to 90 billion. What's the big difference between UK and US? The US has closed its long-term gap in terms of scarring. There is no longer expected a permanent effect on living standards in the US from COVID. In the UK, that is still not the case. 2% of GDP will be persistently lower forever now, unless the government intervenes.
Benjamin Loughnane, you've been duffed up by Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown. What's your response? Last word.
Yeah, no, I think that personally, my view is that we didn't necessarily need to take the approach that we did to lockdown and all the rest of it. We could have allowed the economy to continue to thrive and taken other measures to prevent the spread of the virus. You look at countries like Sweden, they managed to keep their economy open while maintaining a death rate that's actually, I believe, lower than the UK. So, as you said, if we've got this bill of 400 billion for a death rate so high, and there are other countries like Sweden which kept their economy open and they've got a lower death rate, we do need to ask questions about who's paying for that and why we had such a terrible policy in the first place.
My profound thanks to Benjamin Loughnane from the Bow Group political and economic think tank, Alfie Sterling, Chief Economist at the New Economics Foundation, Peter Edwards, journalist and former editor of Labour List, and Conservative MP Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown. Thanks to all of you. It's been a busy day and thanks for making the time. What do you think? mark@gbnews.uk. Coming up, there's still time for you to make your voice heard in tonight's big question. Former Conservative Minister Edwina Currie, she served under Margaret Thatcher, one of the most controversial and high-profile politicians of her generation. An author, of course, a radio host, a broadcaster, and much more. Edwina is live in the studio at 10. And yes, we'll talk about boiled eggs as well. So questions, please. mark@gbnews.uk. Tweet us at GBNews or on Facebook. GB News, check that platform and I'll get your opinions on the national airwaves. Coming up, we're going to talk royals with Robert Jobson.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Lots more to come. I'll get to your emails very shortly, but it's time now to catch up on all of the big royal stories of the week in Crown Duels with legendary royal journalist and biographer Robert Jobson. First, in a dramatic move, the Queen last night pulled out of attending COP26, just days before the 95-year-old monarch is due to attend a reception and give a speech at the landmark conference. Buckingham Palace said that she had regretfully decided not to go and would instead remain at Windsor Castle. As well as cancelling her COP26 appearance, Her Majesty has been told by doctors to stop drinking in the evenings and walking her dogs. Is nothing sacred? Well, let's speak now to Robert Jobson. Robert, are we about to see a permanent gear change from the Queen?
I don't think so, Mark. I think that all of these issues with the Queen are precautionary. I think that there's, as they say, taking an abundance of caution with her. She'll make the decisions of what she's going to do. I think that the COP decision was probably one that she regretted. She said so. But as for all the other things, she'll continue to do light duties until she's ready to continue with a more robust programme. I'm not one of these people who believes the Queen's going to be taking... She'll take advice, she'll listen to advice, but she'll make the ultimate decision. And as for drinking, I understand that she's cut back on wine and she's still having her martini, and I'm sure that she'll be walking her dogs again soon. So all of these things, I think we're probably getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. I think that the Queen has been very active in the last few weeks, probably did a bit too much. She's ably supported by the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cambridge, who will be out there at COP26, hosting the event in a way that we would be expecting. Both of those are great champions on the environment too, as well as Her Majesty.
Anyone that enjoys a martini knows that's not drinking. The question is the Queen in a state of long-term poor health? So we saw the appearance of a walking stick, for example. Do we know whether this is a temporary issue or has the Queen taken a turn for the worst health-wise, Robert? What's your view?
I don't think that she's ill. I mean, I think basically we must remember that Her Majesty's 95 years old. A lot of people don't even get out of their chair at 95 years old if they've been lucky enough to make it to that grand age. She's very, very active. Mentally, she's sharp as a tack, and I don't believe that there's really anything to worry about. As for the preliminary checkups, of course, a woman of 95 who has been monitored by doctors will, of course, have checkups, and that's why she had to staying overnight at the hospital, because there was a slight delay in getting some of those results, and it was just more convenient than driving her all the way back to Windsor in case she had to come back for further tests. So I think that we've been getting ahead of ourselves, but I do believe that we are in a state of transition. We have three adults in very senior positions in the royal family: the Queen, Prince of Wales, and the Duke of Cambridge. And the way the system is working, the Queen is mentally and physically okay to carry on. Whilst that's the case, she will carry on. But with the death of the Duke of Edinburgh, the patriarch of the family, Prince Charles has, if you like, adopted that role. And I think he will do a lot of the heavy lifting with overseas travel. We know he's going to Jordan and Egypt coming up next month. And the Queen, won't be doing those trips. So that's effectively a state visit abroad. And he'll be able to be supported by the Duke of Cambridge. I don't think there's the system is not in need of major repair, or it's working as it is. But if for some reason the Queen couldn't continue at the pace she's going, or felt mentally or physically unable to continue, she wouldn't want to see the monarchy as an institution damaged by her health, and therefore that's why we have an act of regency should it be required.
The Duchess of Sussex, Robert, has appeared in a video reading aloud from her new children's book, The Bench, inspired by husband Prince Harry and son Archie. She read for the clip in the garden of the couple's $14 million mansion in Santa Barbara, California. Take a look.
I wrote this as a poem for my husband and our son Archie, and then turned it into a book so you could enjoy it too. Here you go. The Bench.
For the man and the boy who make my heart go pump, pump. This is your bench, where life will begin. For you and our son, our baby, our kin.
Literature as wooden as the bench about which she writes. But here's the problem. This is the Duchess of Sussex reading from her book and not reading the room.
Well, it's difficult. I think that both Harry and Meghan have had a bit of a pasting, quite some of it deserved, particularly over some of the untruths that was said on the Oprah Winfrey interview and Unchallenged. But, I think there's just a difference here, isn't there, between the way that the Brits do things and the way that some Americans do things. I mean, this is extremely schmaltzy, isn't it? And it just doesn't go down too well with us. Hence, it was a bestseller apparently in America and sold about 2,000 copies in the UK. I've said my piece about Meghan and Harry enough, and I feel that maybe I'm of a different generation, a different species sometimes when I listen to some of the things that I regard as nonsense, but others may be thinking is very sweet and a lovely poem.
Finally, Robert, The Crown is set to feature Martin Bashir's disgraced Panorama interview with Princess Diana, despite William's plea for it to be banned from television. Prince William made this striking statement in May, condemning the BBC's tactics in gaining access to his mother for the interview.
It is my view that the deceitful way the interview was obtained substantially influenced what my mother said. The interview was a major contribution to making my parents' relationship worse, and has since hurt countless others. It brings indescribable sadness to know that the BBC's failures contributed significantly to her fear, paranoia, and isolation that I remember from those final years with her. It is my firm view that this Panorama programme holds no legitimacy and should never be aired again.
There we are. What do we think about that? Netflix bosses are going to continue with this notorious period of history, and that, of course, that outrageous Panorama interview, Robert.
Well, I mean, I didn't like the word paranoia that was used by Prince William about his mum, actually. I think that was a word that was bandied about at the time, and she felt very aggrieved about that. I think that both William and Harry were much young guys at this time, so their memories are going to be different. They're going to be rose-tinted. My view on this is that whether or not we're talking about the Crown here, which is, tabloid telly, it's enjoyed by millions, it's not professing to be history, but let's be honest, the Panorama interview cannot be rewritten out of history just because the royals don't like it. It happened. It was massive. It was watched by millions. It really doesn't matter too much when we're discussing whether or not it happened or not, whether it should have happened. The reality is it did happen. The princess said what she said, and I, for one, believe she really meant what she said. And it's easy for others to say now, oh, it was guided by other things. But she did mean what she said when she spoke there. I thought she spoke very honestly and very openly. How the interview was obtained was pretty despicable. But you can't write it out of history. It was a massive moment in the royal story. I remember it vividly. I was a journalist on the Daily Express at the time, and it was a bombshell. So to suddenly start saying things like it shouldn't be aired or referred to again, we're not in North Korea. We're in Great Britain, and if it has been aired and it has been seen by millions, you can't then just rewrite history. I'm not really into revisionism like that.
Brilliant stuff. Robert, look forward to catching up in a week's time. My thanks to the legendary royal journalist and biographer Robert Jobson. So stand by. Did New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern mean to barge a sign language interpreter out of shot? We'll speak to body language expert Judy James. And former Conservative Minister Edwina Currie is on deck for tonight's big question. She's in the studio. So drop me an email, mark@gbnews.uk, on Twitter @gbnews, or Facebook your question by searching for GB News. Here's the weather.
Hello again. More wet weather, I'm afraid, in some parts of the UK, with the risk of flooding for parts of northern England and southern Scotland. Very mild across the board, with this southwesterly wind bringing subtropical humidity and a lot of moisture. And that moisture is being dumped across the hills of southern Scotland and northwest England as this weather front stalls through the next 24 hours. So more wet weather on the way, on top of what we've already seen through the last 12 to 24 hours. And in some parts of southern Scotland and Cumbria, more than 100 millimetres of rainfall expected by the end of Thursday, leading to a serious risk of flooding in these areas. Elsewhere, drier, but very mild still, with this strong southwesterly wind. Some showers into the northwest of Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland as we start off the day on Thursday. Drier to the southeast, with some sunny spells coming through, but the rain continues for southern and increasingly eastern Scotland, also for northern England, Wales, and increasingly the southwest through Thursday afternoon, that wet weather pushing in. Another mild day to come, nevertheless, and later Thursday, the focus for the heaviest rain increasingly across Wales and the southwest, particularly over the higher ground, where again there could be some disruption and some localised flooding by the end of Friday. On Friday, a wet start to the day with areas of rain or showers across much of the west of the UK, but Northern Ireland starts off bright with some sunshine first thing. Also, bright skies for East Anglia and the southeast as we begin Friday. But this area of cloud and rain is finally making some progress east across the country. It breaks up into showers, still some heavy downpours about in places during the morning on Friday, before eventually something a bit drier and brighter arrives from the west. But it doesn't last. This weekend stays highly unsettled with further rain or showers, some strong winds at times as well, and turning colder.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
It's body language time now, where expert Judy James reads the hidden signs behind the headlines. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Mark. Hi.
Great to have you on the show. Now, Judy, let's talk about the Chancellor Rishi Sunak. He's taken centre stage today, delivering the budget in the House of Commons. Here he is in action.
Fuel duty, cut. Air passenger duty, cut. Alcohol duty, cut. The biggest cut to business rates in 30 years. Growth, up. Jobs, up. Wages, up. Public finances back in a better place. More investment in infrastructure, innovation and skills. A pay rise for over 2 million people and a £2 billion tax cut for the lowest paid. This budget helps with the cost of living.
Is that a Chancellor in control, Judy?
That was quite the performance, Mark. So dynamic, in fact, that what fascinated me was that when he was in full flight, you could actually see Boris sitting behind him at one point, looking quite threatened. He had his folder clutched to his chest and a barrier, as though he'd suddenly seen the future as far as number 10 was concerned. There's a formidable mind going on here. If you look at Rishi's gesticulation, this guy can gesticulate with one hand, the other hand, both hands at the same time. He's doing his Tony Blair tribute act, Thumb of Power at that point. But a lot of the gestures were his own. They were quite congruent. He's doing a full rotation of the head. He's playing to the gallery. So, full flight here, actually. And I think very impressive. He looked as though he'd been marinating in a large vat of optimism for this particular speech.
It's a very good analysis. Let's head over to New Zealand now. New Zealand's COVID policy has hit the headlines. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has admitted that its new plans on loosening restrictions risk turning the country into a two-tier society. Here's what she had to say, and let's carefully watch the body language.
So you basically said this is going to be like, well, it's almost like, you probably don't see it like this, as two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated...
That is what it is, so yep.
Can you describe, as you were previously hoping not to have to do that, I guess, when we still looked like we could maintain elimination across the whole country? I guess that has now changed because...
I think it was less because necessarily of the elimination determining that, and more because we, of course, maintained, and actually we have managed very high vaccination rates.
Well, I've got two adjectives, arrogant and heartless. But what's your professional verdict on Jacinda Ardern's body language there, Judy?
She's fascinating, Mark, because she talks about open communication. She has very little filter on her body language. Now, all of this facial touch is normally associated with anxiety and stress. And that partial facial cover that she's doing there, she's almost covering her mouth up as though she doesn't like what she's going to have to say next. And if you see, she appears to be propping her smile up at some point as well. Then we get this wringing and wiping of the hands, which is often a rejection gesture, again, as though you don't like the message that you're putting across. However, her thumbs are quite erect. She looks quite confident. It's a real mixture of emotions, and you can kind of pick up any one of them, and they're quite conflicting. So a real body language curio for me there.
And did she barge her sign language interpreter out of the way? Watch this.
So you basically said this is going to be like, well, it's almost like, you probably don't see it like this.
It's the wrong one. OK, we're going to see if we can grab that clip. Do you think we have it, Tom? Because there was a notorious bit of footage which went viral in which she appears to have barged her sign language interpreter out of the way following a statement to the press. And we've got it. Take a look, Judy.
Sure.
Here we go. Let's watch. Is it a barge? And she seems to push her out the way. Now, I think the look on the interpreter's face says it all there. But what do you reckon? Was that an accident?
This is called the attribution bias. It's like the ink blot test. You read into it what you want to see, depending on what you think of her right now. She backs away looking quite humble. I mean, it's as though she wants to get out of the way before the guy comes up and talks. I would put it down to an accident. I don't think she's the new Donald Trump. I don't think she's somebody that goes around barging people out of the way. There's no crowing afterwards. And she does seem to look over and suddenly see the interpreter when she comes back and nods to her, and the interpreter does an eye-widening sort of gesture. I don't think that was a mean girl act. I think it was one of those things where you just don't see what's behind you. So I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, Mark.
She gets a stay of execution from Judy James. Judy, thank you so much, and we'll catch you in a week's time. More to come. A really busy 2 hours. What are the implications of the budget for you? We shall get more analysis. Plus, in the next couple of minutes, I'll be joined in the studio by one of the best-known and most forthright politicians of her generation, a woman that served under the Iron Lady herself, Margaret Thatcher, Edwina Currie. And yes, we're going to talk about eggs, we're going to talk about John Major, Strictly Come Dancing, I'm a Celebrity, and much more. Don't go anywhere. But first, the news headlines. Here's Tamsin.
Thanks very much, Mark. Here are the latest headlines. The Chancellor has unveiled his spending plans for a new, stronger post-COVID economy, but acknowledged inflation is likely to rise further. Rishi Sunak announced that total spending will rise by £150 billion, claiming it's the largest increase in government spending this century. So what are the changes? An overhaul to alcohol duty, with the planned tax increase on spirits cancelled from tonight. He's also committed £24 billion for housing, with nearly half of this going towards new affordable homes, while £1.7 billion will go to infrastructure. The planned fuel duty rise will be cancelled, and the universal credit taper rate will be cut by 8%.
Whilst today's budget delivers historically high levels of public spending, its success will be measured not by the billions we spend, but by the outcomes we achieve and the difference we make to people's lives. The budgets are set, the plans are in place, the task is clear. Now we must deliver, because this isn't the government's money, it's taxpayers' money.
Labour has criticised today's measures, saying there's no coherent plan, that it does nothing to address what it calls the cost of living and climate crisis. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, gave his verdict of the budget in a video from home after testing positive for COVID-19. He praised his colleagues for responding on his behalf.
But wasn't Ed Miliband at PMQs and Rachel Reeves in the budget response just brilliant? Both of them stepped up at short notice, very short notice, to absolutely call out the government for their failure on the climate crisis and to hammer the Chancellor on his smoke and mirror budget, which does nothing for working people and nothing about the cost of living crisis.
Prosecutors investigating the death of a cinematographer on the set of the movie Rust have said a lead projectile has been recovered. Helena Hutchins died last week after being accidentally shot by the actor Alec Baldwin while filming in New Mexico. Director Joel Souza was also injured but is now recovering after leaving hospital. The Santa Fe County Sheriff says investigations are ongoing. A climate protester dressed in a Boris Johnson costume has set fire to a prop boat outside the COP26 venue in Glasgow. The stunt was organised by Ocean Rebellion, an offshoot of climate change activist group Extinction Rebellion, in protest against fossil fuels. Well, you're right up to date. Now back to Tonight Live.
It's time now for The Big Question, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of sport, business, entertainment and politics. And tonight, one of the most high-profile politicians of her generation, Edwina Currie, a best-selling author, broadcaster and the former Conservative MP for South Derbyshire from 1983 until 1997, something of a golden era for the Conservative Party, particularly during the Thatcher years. Edwina was forced to resign as Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Health in December 1988 after she issued a warning about salmonella in British eggs. The statement that most of the egg production in this country sadly is now infected with salmonella sparked outrage among farmers and egg producers and caused egg sales in the country to decline by 60%. But if she called out a serious problem with how eggs were being produced at the time, perhaps the remarkable safety and quality of the eggs we now enjoy are her positive legacy. I'll put that to her. Edwina is the author of 6 best-selling novels and 5 works of non-fiction, including her diaries from 1987 to 1992, in which she revealed a 4-year affair from 1984 to 88 with the man that would become Prime Minister, John Major. For many years, Edwina hosted a top-rated and, I've got to say, fantastically well-produced weekend talk show on BBC Radio 5 Live. And she has barely been off the radio or telly since, appearing in Wife Swap, Strictly Come Dancing, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. And I have personally suffered at the hands of her keen intellect as she beat me to the top trophy in Celebrity Mastermind, an award she's won twice, which must be unprecedented. But unprecedented could be this woman's middle name. Always defying the odds, fearless, controversial, principled, and never boring. Edwina Currie, welcome to GB News.
Can I go home now?
Yeah, you're done. But you can't follow that introduction, can you?
Well, I'm hoping to over the next few years. You never know.
You definitely will. Mastermind, let's get that out the way. The elephant in the room. You've won it twice. I'm not sure if anyone has ever done that before.
It was done afterwards. Reverend Richard Coles did it not long after. But I think I was helped by my special subjects. I had Marie Curie sitting on one shoulder.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And Lady Astor sitting on the other shoulder. And they were whispering the answers into my ears.
Were you a particularly clever child?
I was clever, but I wasn't that clever. I always enjoyed studying. I had asthma as a child, and there was no medication of any kind at that time. And that meant that I couldn't run around, I couldn't play hockey and all the other stuff. And if I sat quietly in a corner reading a book, then teachers were happy. So at the age of 8 and 9, I was reading Jane Austen and all that stuff, and finding it interesting and exciting. I didn't understand it all, but I enjoyed the language and I enjoyed the storytelling. These days I collect Victorian first editions, and when you hold a book that's 150 years old or more, and you know that people loved it and it was a huge popular success at the time. Look at those beautiful illustrations. We don't have illustrations in books anymore. They believed in having beautiful illustrations.
Not just in children's literature, but in adult literature too.
As well, yeah. So you
Definitely.
could visualise the
Dickens.
characters.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with you on that one. I might borrow a couple of those first editions. I promise to return them.
You can buy your own.
Oh, I'll try that. But look, here's the thing. I mean, some people think of reading as a form of escapism. Was there anything to escape from as a child?
Well, I grew up in Liverpool, flattened by the war. I was born after the war, but it was all around you with horrible bomb sites and three-legged dogs and Rose Bay willow herb growing out of ruins and so on. And it wasn't until a long time afterwards, Mark, that I realised that actually I grew up in a city that had been traumatised by the war, and a community, the Orthodox Jewish community, that was finding, I can remember hearing the words, there's no good news coming out of Germany. And what they meant was so many people had died there. And it was a long, long time, I think, before Liverpool recovered from that, as it has done now. It's a vibrant and exciting place. Yeah. But I also felt that I wanted to spread my wings as a result. And school gave me the opportunity, because if you did well at school, you could have the opportunity of going to college.
Well, yes, and deputy head girl. So your path to power was, predestined.
I went to the Oxford interviews with a few A-levels under my belt, and they said to me, "And what did you do in half-term?" And I said, "I led a demo." Scouse. The Beatles were all over the place. You led I led a demo. I did, because, you see, the City Council wants to close our school, And, the Beatles went to the boys' school and I went at the girls' school, and they want to close it. So we had a demo, we had a petition, and we marched it down from our school right down to the town hall, and we had police escorts, and it's been in all the papers. And the Dons, bless them, went green. And I remember one saying, "You're not planning to do the same thing here, are you?" And I'm saying, "Well, it depends how you behaved." If I think about it, I go cold all over. But do you know what? It worked. Because at one point, one of them said to me, "If we offer you a place at St Anne's, would you accept it?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know about that. I've got a place at Newhall, Cambridge, and I've got a place in Manchester. It's just a place, John Lennon's sitting on my shoulder whispering, 'Go on, go for it, girl.'" I said, "Well, suppose if you offered me a scholarship, that'd be different, wouldn't it?"
This is amazing. So you negotiated yourself a scholarship?
They did. I do not recommend this. This is very high-risk territory, believe me. This is not the way to do it. You get your 5 A stars and you'll be okay.
Where does this self-confidence come from? Did you always have it? This courage?
It was always sort of nothing to lose, really.
You are fearless.
No, I fear things, but I fear different things from other people. You mentioned I'm a celebrity. And I have no fear of things like spiders or I haven't any phobias like that. One of the producers said to me at one point, "Aren't you afraid of anything?" And I just said, "People." Remembering, you know, IRA days and some of the tragedies that have been happening recently.
Yeah. Well, let's talk politics, because you've served under some very high-profile chancellors. You were in Parliament from 1983 to 1997. I think it was certainly a very golden era for the Conservatives, electorally certainly.
Nigel Lawson was determined to both simplify the tax system and have fewer taxes, and also to bring tax rates down, bearing in mind that, you know, people have been paying 98% on unearned what was called unearned income, in other words, income from investments, and the tax rate on businesses was very, very high. So he was determined to bring it down, and felt that if you have lower tax rates, you know, the Laffer curve, then you will bring in more money. Now, Rishi, I don't think is quite doing that. I mean, I heard the conversation earlier about the taxes on banks coming down, but actually the banks are going to be paying more tax, more corporation tax than anybody else. They're going to be paying 28%, which is, in international terms, is quite a high whack. And I think what his fear was that if you push it too high, they'll all just go and register in Hong Kong or New York or somewhere and not pay us anything. So what Rishi's got to do is quite a difficult balancing act. I will look with interest to see how it pans out. I thought he sounded quite giddy this afternoon, today.
And we've just had an analysis of his body language, and Judy James said that it was a very powerful, enthused performance. Do you think he's a Prime Minister in waiting?
Oh, yes, of course he is. All chancellors
do you think he's got the skill set?
I think at the moment he is a puppy still learning. I mean, he came in very difficult circumstances at the beginning of the pandemic, well, in February last year, and had to learn extremely fast. But he's an extraordinarily bright man. He's probably the brightest chancellor that we've had, probably since Lawson. He can handle all the data. He can handle the complex stuff from the banks, from finance, the debt level. As some of your commentators earlier demonstrated, they don't understand the relationship between the national debt and the growth of GDP. Because what he is doing, what he's hoping to do, fingers crossed, is that although the debt level has risen to eye-watering levels, the economy is growing at 4%, 6%, 6% more, and the idea is that the debt will shrink as a proportion of GDP, which is very much to be desired, not least because he's also signalling to the Bank of England he wants interest rates to go up a bit. So servicing the debt is going to cost a lot of money. Now, Rishi gets all that. He's well on top of all that. But he's also on top of, I think, a very good policy, which is, if it's worth doing, do it properly.
And you mentioned on this programme a couple of weeks ago that although it's not a Conservative approach to have the highest tax burden since the war, the ultimate Conservative philosophy is pragmatism, and that's why this is a Conservative Chancellor. It is a Conservative government. We are in unprecedented times. But enough about Rishi. I want to talk about you, because you were once a young and talented politician as well, learning on the job. You
a served long time ago.
Well, but it was quite a rosy period for the Conservatives. Margaret Thatcher, at the height of her powers, in 1983, you came in after the Falklands victory, of course. Tell me about serving under Margaret Thatcher. Tell me about the woman that you knew.
At that time, this was her best time, between about 1982, from the Falklands, through the 83 election, which we won with a majority of 144. Ain't that nice?
Amazing.
158 new members of Parliament we had. Right through till she felt that was the truth, that was the best way forward. Whereas in her early years, she'd been actually very cautious, and she had used us for intelligence on what was going on in the patch. She wanted to know how people were reacting.
Surrounded herself by experts.
And she would listen and she would evaluate, and then she would choose. In the final years, she scattered all that. She annoyed all the best people. She got rid of Lawson, she got rid of Howe, Willie Whitelaw had retired, and it was as if she was Boadicea Supreme. But you know what happened to Boadicea in the end? She lost.
That's it.
And
she believed the hype. And let's talk about your very successful stint in public life. Can we just deal with the eggs thing? Because I take the view that there was a problem with egg production. There was disease within aspects of it. You bravely called it out. You got pelters, but the rules changed after that, and we've not had a problem with eggs since.
That is, broadly speaking, right. What actually happened as well was many years later, that was 1988, around 2000 or so, about 10 years later, the egg industry came to me, and I'm out of Parliament by then, and they said, we now acknowledge that we have, and still have, a problem, and you were right, and we are going to do something about it, and we need your help. My help, I'm not in Parliament, I'm not a biologist or anything. But I said, I tell you what, when you can come to me and say that there is no longer a problem with eggs, you're having them all tested, and you've eliminated salmonella and some of the other problems, I will tell everybody. I won't take a penny from you. They've only ever given me an egg cup. But I will tell everybody, because I know how much extraordinary hard work and good science that is going to require. And you're going to have to put a lot of money in it, because the new government, they're not in the least interested.
Remarkable stuff. You made up with that industry. You were part of the National Egg Awareness Campaign, and I want to thank you for the great eggs we have now. Can I ask you about John Major? Because, I would like to be a gentleman and not discuss aspects of your private life, but it's well publicised. In fact, in your excellent diaries, you've written about your short relationship with the man that became Prime Minister. And what really caught my eye is that he was potentially the love of your life.
Oh, wow. One of the great advantages of being older, Mark, is that you can say it so long ago, I'm not sure I remember all the details. I think I was lucky in many ways to have a lot of close friends in Parliament, and to have the support that I had. When I went into the House in '83, there were 23 women in the place. One was Prime Minister. There were another dozen of us on the Tory side and 10 on the Labour side, none from any of the other parties. And there was actually quite a dismissive attitude on the behalf of some of the blokes, on both sides, I may say. Ask Claire Short how some of the men reacted. And to find that there were people who were friends and who would be supporters and helpful and encouraging, not just John, but others as well, that was really very nice indeed. And it's very easy to fall for somebody in those circumstances. It happens all the time. They can take till they're blue in the face, no fraternisation at work. It happens all the time. If you love your job, if you're passionate about it, it means a lot. If it means more to the people you're surrounded by than to the people at home, then the opportunities are there for great romances, really.
Are you on good terms still? Any regrets?
Oh, I don't have regrets. Regrets are a waste of time. You just enjoy life and do your best, hey?
Definitely, to your right. Really sorry to hear that you lost your husband, John Jones, last year. I met him, and he was a gentleman, and I know you loved him very much. And that's not a long time ago. He
was a very, very special guy. He was, all the fuss about the police and the tragedies have been happening recently. He was a detective superintendent in the Met. He was one of those, and there are thousands of them in police forces up and down the country who are prepared to put their life on the line to protect us. Many of the criticisms are absolutely right, but we forget the people then who are prepared to do that for us. When a bomb goes off, we all go one way, except for the police and the special branch and the soldiers who run towards the bomb. Over and over again, I have seen that happen. And I was married for 20 years to one of them. I was very, very proud of him. Plus, he had a lot of great stories.
He was a wonderful character when I encountered him. And, of course, he featured in Wife Swap, didn't he? And that was a really classic, a vintage episode. The clock's against us. I'd love you to return. Can I extend an invitation to you to come back to the programme?
I would be honoured.
Final question. You are the queen of reinvention, politics into becoming a published author, a national broadcaster. I loved your show on 5 Live. I listened to it religiously. What's next for the queen of reinvention?
When I'm ready to tell you, Mark, I will tell you.
Coy as ever. You can't get inch off this lady. Thank you so much to Edwina Currie. Do check out her amazing books, both the novels and the non-fiction, well worth a read. And there you go. It's on record she will return to the GB News studio. Coming up, Spiked Online's chief political writer Brendan O'Neill on why an unsavoury right-wing abuse for Alec Baldwin following his accidental shooting on set is completely unacceptable. But after the break, our economics editor Liam Halligan unpicks the highs and lows of today's budget bonanza. See you in 2.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point.
Not everyone loves Edwina Currie. I mean, I want to thank her so much for joining us. But Patrick says, I would never interview her. The fact that she's happy to treat the unvaccinated like second-class citizens and not be on her train carriage says it all. Pat, thank you for that. There we are. Well, a few other emails coming in. One from Phil, who says, Edwina, do you think John Major was abreast of things, or did he go over the top when trying to get to the bottom of something? Can see what you've done there, Phil, and I salute your excellent work. Keep them coming. Views at gbnews.uk. Now, with the latest analysis and reaction to today's Bonanza budget, I'm delighted to welcome our very own economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. Hello, Liam.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good. Have you had coffee?
I've had plenty of coffee.
Good. All right. Well, your head will hit the pillow eventually. But let's talk about today's budget. Was it an economic or political event?
It was a bit of both. I just heard Edwina Currie say that Rishi Sunak's the most intellectually capable Chancellor since Nigel Lawson. I used exactly the same line when I spoke as we were responding to the budget on our show today. I completely agree with her. He's a very smart guy, extremely numerate, extremely market savvy, given his time as an investment banker. But he's increasingly the consummate politician. What he did today was deliver a really big spending budget that will appeal to the broader public, will hopefully help the Tories to make hay in some of those red wall seats they've got to retain in order to challenge at the next general election. But at the same time, with his rhetoric, he told the Conservative backbenchers, you know what? I don't really like a big state. I'm a small state kind of guy. I wish, government wasn't the solution to everything, and it isn't. And by the way, I want to cut taxes quite soon. So, Boris Johnson was sitting next to him. This was the most cakeist budget I've seen for a long time. He wanted to have his cake and eat it. And it all hinges on the one number in the tsunami of data that we had today, and my head's swimming with all the numbers that we've been through, It's the growth assumption for this year.
Yeah.
Back in March, the Office of Budget Responsibility, the kind of independent forecasting watchdog, said 4% growth this year. The economy would expand 4%. Sunak saying, actually, it's going to be 6.5% this year. And if it's 6.5%, all that extra growth creates lots of extra tax revenue in the years to come, which he can give away and generate the kind of positive headlines that are adorning tomorrow's newspapers. If the growth doesn't happen, he's got a problem.
Rishi Sunak, by instinct, is fiscally prudent. But how much of this budget was foisted upon him, therefore?
He says he's fiscally prudent, and when he's asked by newspaper interviewers, oh, are you Milton Friedman or are you John Maynard Keynes, the two most famous economists of the 20th century, Milton Friedman being a kind of small state Chicago school guy, John Maynard Keynes portrayed as a much bigger spending, government expenditure-led kind of guy. He says, oh, obviously, I'm Milton Friedman. And yet he's doing a very good impression of John Maynard Keynes.
But how much of it comes from number 10? Because we know that Boris likes to splash the cash. Many people think that he is fiscally incontinent. He certainly is privately. Do you think there's a tension there between number 10 and number 11?
I think Rishi Sunak wants to convey that there's a tension and signals that there is a tension. But for now, he's doing a very good job of assuaging that tension by basically doing pretty much what Boris Johnson would do if he was Chancellor. Under the cover of COVID, the state has got much, much bigger. The state is bigger now than it's been at any point since the Second World War. Spending on the NHS has gone up by 35% over the last 2.5 years. Yes, we've had a pandemic, but does anybody really think that we're going to spend less on the NHS? No, it will be forever, because state spending, once given, it's very difficult to take it away. It acts like a ratchet. Maybe as we come into land at the next general election, maybe Rishi Sunak, having spent big now, hopes he can be the person who can rein the state back in and to deliver some tax cuts. But again, Mark, he can only do that if the economy not only grows, but grows like Billio. A lot of economists think 6.5% a year. When the economy's stalled and stymied by the supply chain issues, the things that I talk about on my On the Money show every day, it's going to be hard to grow at 6.5%. And if he doesn't, he's not going to be able to deliver those tax cuts.
Liam Halligan is back on the box tomorrow here at GB News. In the meantime, he's going to get his 8 hours of beauty sleep. Many thanks to our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. Lots more to get through. Stay with us. It's now time for The Outsider, where some of our favourite GB News commentators have the chance to sound off on an important issue that matters to them, that's often being ignored by the rest of the media. Will Alec Baldwin and his career ever recover following his tragic accidental shooting of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins? The jury is still out on that one, but perhaps one thing is clear. The right-wing glee at the shooting by the actor exposed the problem of anti-political correctness gone mad. Joining me now to discuss this is Spiked Online's chief political writer, Brendan O'Neill. Hi, Brendan.
Hi, Mark.
What's happened here is that the right in American politics have just relinquished the moral high ground.
I think that's right. I think that is what's happening here. And some sections of the right are taking a bit too much glee in what's happened to Alec Baldwin for my liking. Now, I agree with them that Alec Baldwin is a fairly irritating character. He's a pretty typical political liberal that you find in Hollywood. He hates Trump. He wants more gun control. He's a bit sniffy about people who vote for the Republicans. All of those kinds of views that can be quite irritating. But the way in which this accident is being used to humiliate him by sections of the right, I find that very unpleasant. It's like they're using this incredibly unfortunate incident in which a young 42-year-old woman was killed. They're using that to score political points against Alec Baldwin, and I think that's really quite nauseating.
Well, yes, you and I have a good few things in common, Brendan, particularly that both of us and your brilliant website, Spiked Online, rails against cancel culture. But it means that when I'm doing this job on GB News, I can't really ever ask for anyone to be sacked or cancelled, because it would be hypocrisy. And that's the risk that some of these voices run with these remarks.
That's right. Essentially what some of them are saying is, well, we hope his career goes down the toilet. We hope that he suffers as a consequence of what was just a horrific accident so far as we know. And that's a really opportunistic, cynical approach to take. It is an attempt to enact cancel culture by the back door, to leap onto a terrible accident that happened on a film set in New Mexico and to use it essentially to punish someone whose political views they don't like. Now, it's perfectly legitimate to not like Alec Baldwin's political views. I don't like them very much. Most Americans, I would guess, don't like them very much either. That's fine, but we have to separate that from what happened on this film set and not use this accident as part of a political vendetta. That's where I think the right starts to look like the left side of the culture war. It starts to look quite opportunistic and even immoral.
Is there any evidence of the right going for cancel culture in this country as well? Because we think, don't we, of sort of toxic cancel culture and wokeism being the domain of the left. Is there any suggestion that it's happening on the right here in this country?
I think there is, yes. I think it is predominantly pursued by what passes for the left in the 21st century. It is usually radical leftists who want to no-platform people and punish people for having the incorrect views on transgenderism or any other sort of issue. But there are right-wing attempts to cancel people too, and I think the right often appears to be pro-freedom of speech just because the left is so anti-freedom of speech. So the right can kind of bask in the glory of being the people who defend liberty. But they are a bit cagey on freedom of speech, and sometimes they do push a kind of cancellation kind of line against who they would describe as extremists, or people who protest at statues, or people who promote critical race theory, all things that I am also concerned about. But these kinds of things need to be challenged in the realm of public discussion rather than being cancelled and censored and demonised. So the right needs to be careful that it doesn't go down the cancel culture road, because we have far more censorship than we need right now as it is.
I think that's right. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, the moment anything becomes a religion or an ideology, that's the moment at which you risk being a hypocrite. Let's take a look at Candace Owens, a right-wing commentator in the United States. And she sent this tweet. Alec Baldwin spent 4 years dedicated to painting Donald Trump and his supporters as evil murderers. What has happened to Alec would be an example of poetic justice if it weren't for the actual innocent people that were murdered by him. Pray for their families. So sad. I mean, the bottom line is, you know, this is in the context of the accidental death of a cinematographer.
Yeah, I find that kind of opinion quite unpleasant, actually. Candace Owens is perfectly at liberty to make those comments. I think she's now deleted them because she's quite embarrassed about them. But anyway, she's perfectly at liberty to say that. But it is opportunistic. It is quite cynical. And I don't understand how something like that could be seen as poetic justice just because Alec Baldwin has political views that Owens and other people don't like. If you want to challenge his political views, then do that. Have the argument, make the case against him, have those kinds of discussions, but don't leap on a tragic accident to do your dirty work for you. And I'm worried that some people on the right have done that. We should treat this as a horrible accident that needs to be investigated, and then we should go back to criticising Alec Baldwin once his life gets back to normal, but keep those two things separate.
Brilliant to have you on the show, Brendan. Brendan O'Neill is Spiked Online's chief political writer. Cracking website. Give it a read, Spiked Online. They cover politics, education, science, you name it. And absolutely, it's all about balance there and different opinions. Now, coming up in Uncancelled at 11, superstar columnist Rod Liddle on the row surrounding football manager Joey Barton's use of the word Holocaust to describe his team's performance. But next, in the media buzz, Insulate Britain's glue is met with ink. Find out why after this.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Everyone does.
Well, let's take a look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages as part of our media buzz. Where shall we start, Tom? OK, let's go to the Metro newspaper. Here we go. Cheers, Rishi. There you go. There's the Chancellor, of course, with his famous and iconic red box. And here are the details of that story. Sunak rolls out the biggest cut in beer tax for 50 years. £150 billion will be spent on public services, with growth up 6.5%, but fears that inflation will top 4% means no rise in living standards. Next up, let's have the Eye. Big spender Sunak takes tax burden back to the 1950s. Chancellor takes advantage of economic upgrade to raise state spending in every department amid new warnings that Britain is facing a cost of living squeeze. I think that's going to be the story throughout this winter. Universal credit cuts for low-income families are scaled back, but rising inflation is forecast to wipe out projected wage increases next year. OK, and The Guardian. Sunak's post-COVID plan, spend now, cut taxes later. I think that's a brilliant headline from The Guardian and pretty much sums up the budget in one sentence. Rishi Sunak intends to cut taxes before the next election after limiting his budget help to dealing with a winter cost of living crisis. The Chancellor made clear that the boost to spending was made possible by a stronger than expected economic recovery this year. Well, there you go. We'll get more thoughts on that very shortly. Still with me, my fabulous panel, columnist and commentator Emily Carver, co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albi Amankona, and broadcaster and author Amy Nickel. Now to what is hopefully a milestone in men's sport. Adelaide United footballer Josh Cavallo has come out as gay, becoming the only current male professional footballer in the world to do so. He opened up about his sexuality in an emotional video on his Australian club's Twitter page called Josh's Truth. Here it is.
Hi everyone, it's Josh Cavallo here. I'm at my home here in Adelaide. There's something personal that I need to share with everyone. I'm a footballer and I'm gay. Growing up, I always felt the need to hide myself, because I was ashamed. And ashamed I'll never be able to do what I love and be gay. Hiding who I truly am to pursue a dream I always wished for as a kid. All I want to do is play football and be treated equally. I want to inspire and show people that it's okay to be yourself and play football. It's okay to be gay and to play football.
Well, Adelaide United have rightly described Josh as remarkable and brave. And Albie, he is remarkable. He's the only gay footballer in the world. How surprising, considering that at least 10% of society are gay in every other industry.
Yes, absolutely. Well, according to Kinsey, that's certainly the case. For me, this story, obviously, it's amazing that he's come out, but for me, I feel a little bit sad that we're still in the era of firsts. It sort of feels like it should be something which should have been dealt with before. And, you know, we've had some footballers come out after they've retired, like Thomas Hitzlsperger, who was in Aston Villa. And I think it was Rio Ferdinand who was speaking earlier about how he'd actually spoken to a gay footballer in Britain who wanted to come out, but he was actually advised not to come out by his lawyers. So there is a wider problem within football where potentially management feels that there might be a commercial burden of a gay footballer coming out in publicly. And that needs to change, I think.
Well, yes, because we thought, didn't we, that homophobia had kind of gone away from our society, Emily?
Well, it's sort of strange. You know, I saw this story and I was quite shocked that he's the only openly gay footballer in the world who plays at this level. I was quite shocked because, of course, we hear, you know, a lot about LGBT, corporates, football clubs, so on, but clearly there's still a stigma on the ground that people feel. And I wonder whether it's the case that he was that footballers are extremely nervous about coming out from the backlash that they might receive, or whether some just prefer to keep it private for other reasons. But clearly there's an issue there if
wait a minute.
people are only feeling that they can
Well,
come
I think
out.
we're possibly all being a bit too compassionate here. I'm wondering whether if you're a male gay footballer in the Premier League that's on 200 grand a week, I wonder whether you've got enough of a platform and enough of a bank balance to be brave and just say, do you know what, I'm gay. And if I lose sponsorship deals or all the rest of it, so be it. Elton John came out as bisexual in 1976 at a time when the world was a very homophobic place. He was told by his management, your record sales will halve in America. That's exactly what happened. He didn't care because he decided, I've got to be true to myself.
Well, that's true.
And that was decades ago.
This man is hardly, you know, living in Afghanistan under Taliban rule, is he? So there is a lot of, you know, people in every single industry come out as gay, and most people don't bat an eyeyelid. If this is the only one that's come out as openly gay,
I don't know.
I
don't buy it. If I was a Premier League footballer and a gay man, I would come out straight away.
I don't know if you can say that, though, because you haven't got that experience to be informed on that. And if you look at the statistics around homophobia in football, it's a massive, massive problem. Even, you know, it's something that having rainbow laces on your boots certainly isn't going to solve. I looked at some research today, and 30% of football fans would feel uncomfortable if they saw two men kissing in the stands. 80% of football fans who are gay have encountered homophobic abuse when they've gone to football matches.
I feel uncomfortable if I saw a straight couple snogging in the grounds, you know, right next to me. I don't know if that means that you're necessarily homophobic.
That's an issue about PDA, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I think when it's specific to two men, it's quite homophobic, unfortunately.
I think just the act of coming out is hard enough, even just for an ordinary civilian.
It's harder in the football.
I found it very hard. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be a footballer at age 21, starting your career, coming out to the international
So do you think I'm being a bit hard on any gay Premier League footballer?
You are.
I do think you're being hard.
But I suspect you would come out if you were a Premier League footballer that was gay.
Yes, I probably would, because it would be a burden.
Why are they so quiet?
You've just seen a video of a boy who's in his 20s saying he spent his life feeling ashamed and awful and all these things. So it's not easy. He's just told you that it's not. So.
But he's done it.
He
and
has.
others have not.
There seems to be a total mismatch, doesn't there, between the way that we celebrate LGBT, a Q+, you know, causes and so on.
Please remember all the letters.
Yes, sorry, thank you.
OK. What I'm going to do, I'll write them all down.
And then the actual reality of the fact that clearly, I mean, whether we think that, you know, that they should or should not be able to come out freely and so on, clearly it's not matched up with the way that we seem to be, you know,
the actual behaviour,
celebrating the causes and the actual experience of players. I don't know.
Well, what do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. By the way, I did get an email in from Dennis who said, Mark, Robbie Rogers, who played for Leeds, came out a few years ago. So thank you so much for confirming that one. Linda says only 10% are gay in our society. If you watch TV, you'd think it was 50%. Can't argue with that one, Lynn. Now, Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood has criticised a tasteless and offensive exhibition of artistic suicide vests and has demanded it be taken down. The bronze cast vests on display in a Bournemouth gallery titled Monuments to Immortality have been created by the brothers Jake and Dinos Chapman, who are known for their shock art. Elwood, whose brother very sadly died in the 2002 Bali bombing, wants the exhibition removed immediately. He said to the Daily Mail, "My brother was killed by a terrorist wearing one of these jackets. I strongly urge this insensitive exhibition to be removed immediately. It's tasteless, offensive and irresponsible, and I hope the exhibitors will act swiftly in taking it down." But I just wonder about this, Amy, because we're talking about art, and art is free expression, and I don't think that you can sort of micromanage it in such a way as to say to artists, that is not acceptable.
Precisely. I mean, there's one thing, you can't conflate terrorism and art about terrorism. I think that you can make art about absolutely anything. In no way, in no circumstances have art been shown to fuel extremism. There are plenty of things within our society that are fueling extremism, and I don't think this Chapman art exhibition is one of them.
And look, my heart goes out to Tobias and his family for the tragedy that they experienced, and so many thousands of families who have been victims of a suicide bombing, Albie. But this is art. There can be no rules, in my opinion.
It is art, and I think what we have to realise is what might be insensitive to some might be fascinating to others.
Yeah.
And I think what a lot of the aims of these terrorist organisations are is to limit our freedoms in the West. And we have freedom of expression, and that means the freedom to be offended too.
Yeah, what do you think about this, Emily?
I think it's quite an extraordinary intervention from a Conservative politician who are often talking about cancel culture. I'm sure I've heard Tobias talking about clampdowns on freedom of expression, freedom of speech and so on. It seems very strange. I mean, obviously, he finds it deeply offensive because of very personal reasons that I can't possibly even, fathom. I don't have a family member who's died in a suicide attack, thank goodness. But it's quite an extraordinary intervention from a politician at that level of government to say that essentially a museum, a gallery, an art gallery must take down an exhibition because he finds it offensive.
Yeah.
And if you look at their body of work, they've never done anything that isn't offensive.
Yeah.
These Chapman brothers, it's quite interesting.
I like offensive art. It's there to provoke.
That's right. I think that unless you're breaking the law, anything goes, but that's just my view. Lots of emails coming in on gay footballers. This is Andrew. Why the hell does anyone need to tell the world about their personal proclivity? I find it extraordinary that they think we want to know. Hey, Mark, Amy knows very little about football. Of course it would be disturbing to see two men kissing in the stands. That sort of thing belongs on the pitch. Very nice. Nicely put there. That's from Snooky in Scotland. That's a great point. Dear Mark, says Raga, if you were gay and in the Premier League, you would not come out. If it was that easy, so many would. I came out at 50. Why? Simply because this world is still not safe for all, particularly the LGBT plus community. And I love GB News. Well, Raga, we love you. And congratulations on coming out at the age of 50. So many emails. I'll get to more of them as and when I can. Just maybe importantly, this one from David. Just 2 weeks ago, two men holding hands in Birmingham were beaten up in a homophobic attack. Not that much has changed. There you go. Well, I'll get to more of your views shortly. The numpties from Insulate Britain were terrorising motorists again today, but the Great British Fight Back has begun. Firstly, take a look at this man moving along a wall of Wallies in North Acton, squirting ink in their faces in protest at the disruption. Journalist Vinnie O'Dowd captured this latest moment of the public losing their patience and proving that the pen truly is mightier than the deplored. And 25 miles away in Dartford, we caught a glimpse of another new weapon in the arsenal of public frustration, the bagpipes.
All the ambulances, fire trucks, just crazy. But you're damaging your cause, that's the thing. You're damaging. What I was doing obnoxiously bagpiping in your face is what you're doing to all this traffic. You're obnoxiously holding up people's lives, people's work, but you're damaging your cause, guys. You're actually damaging.
What a legend. Channeling a William Wallace-like spirit and fighting for our freedom from this nonsense makes him a hero in my eyes. But shockingly, police moved him along, and I don't think that it's wise to move a Scotsman on at any time. So, should British museums return so-called looted artefacts? We'll discuss that after the break. And coming up in Uncancelled at 11, superstar columnist Rod Liddle. But first, the weather.
Hello again. More wet weather, I'm afraid, in some parts of the UK, with the risk of flooding for parts of northern England and southern Scotland. Very mild across the board, with this southwesterly wind bringing subtropical humidity and a lot of moisture. And that moisture is being dumped across the hills of southern Scotland and northwest England as this weather front stalls through the next 24 hours. So more wet weather on the way, on top of what we've already seen through the last 12 to 24 hours. And in some parts of southern Scotland and Cumbria, more than 100 millimetres of rainfall expected by the end of Thursday, leading to a serious risk of flooding in these areas. Elsewhere, drier, but very mild still with this strong southwesterly wind. Some showers into the northwest of Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland as we start off the day on Thursday. Drier to the southeast with some sunny spells coming through, but the rain continues for southern and increasingly eastern Scotland, also for northern England, Wales, and increasingly the southwest through Thursday afternoon, that wet weather pushing in. Another mild day to come, nevertheless, and later Thursday, the focus for the heaviest rain increasingly across Wales and the southwest, particularly over the higher ground where, again, there could be some disruption and some localised flooding by the end of Friday. On Friday, a wet start to the day with areas of rain or showers across much of the west of the UK, but Northern Ireland starts off bright with some sunshine first thing. Also, bright skies for East Anglia and the southeast as we begin Friday. But this area of cloud and rain is finally making some progress east across the country. It breaks up into showers, still some heavy downpours about in places during the morning on Friday before eventually something a bit drier and brighter arrives from the west. But it doesn't last. This weekend stays highly unsettled with further rain or showers, some strong winds at times as well, and turning colder. My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To the Point.
Welcome back to Tonight Live. More on the media buzz tonight with our superstar panel, columnist and commentator Emily Carver, co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Aldi Amankona, and broadcaster and author Amy Nickel. Now, a Cambridge University college has handed back a cultural artefact that was looted from West Africa during the colonial era in an unprecedented move. Jesus College, Cambridge, returned a sculpture of a cockerel taken by British troops in 1897, one of hundreds of Benin bronzes that were pillaged from the once mighty kingdom of Benin, located in what is now Nigeria. They are among Africa's most culturally significant artefacts, and the handover marks a milestone in the years-long fight by African countries to recover works taken by Western explorers and colonisers. So should all British institutions return artefacts from other countries? Emily?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because taken alone, I don't necessarily have a problem with this particular artefact being returned to Nigeria. But I do wonder where this ends, because of course there are artefacts that have been, travelled across the world from many different countries to different countries. People have colonised different countries. It's not certainly just the West that is guilty of such behaviour. So I do wonder whether it is really worthwhile and where this practice ends. Are we going to force countries to return absolutely everything that they've received from another country, or indeed that they've looted from another country? I'm not really
There's
sure
no
what
looting.
the purpose is.
I'm not going to have that on my watch. Albie, the bottom line is most of this stuff was rescued by British explorers. It would have been stolen or destroyed if we hadn't taken it.
It absolutely was looted, Mark. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever studied colonial history, but it was looted. But we don't need to disagree on that. I think
the British Museum is full of artefacts like the Elgin marbles, which were rescued from destruction and preserved and placed in a museum.
But this particular artefact, which has been returned, was looted. And I think what we should focus on is looking at how happy those people were to get a piece of their culture back. I mean, there's a lot of excitement about the Bayeux tapestry coming back to Britain for the first time in a very long time. And these artefacts mean a lot to people. They mean a lot to nations. And if there are requests for them to be returned to their home nations, I think those requests should be fulfilled.
Amy?
I can't believe this is actually up for debate. You've said looted, pillaged, stolen. Should they go back? Surely it's obvious, isn't it? If something is stolen, then, yeah, it should be returned, if possible.
But, of course, a lot of this is very politicised, isn't it? You could argue that the Greeks say that the Elgin marbles were stolen by explorers and brought to the British Museum in London, but the bottom line is they likely wouldn't be in existence if it wasn't for the fact that we'd taken them.
We're not talking about the Elgin marbles, though. We're talking about this Nigerian artefact, and we're talking about a lot of the stuff in the British Museum, which was definitely stolen and taken, and often with force, really horrible circumstances. So, of course, it should be returned.
We don't know the full circumstances.
We don't know the circumstances of all of the artefacts, but we know the likelihood of most of them.
But I know
not
what this
particularly
means,
nice.
Emily, which it means we're going to go through our museums and send everything back to countries all around the world, and we'll have no museums left, except for the fact that if it wasn't for the British, so many of these objects would be gone forever.
But Mark...
You'd probably end up having... It's true, if you followed this to its logical conclusion, you'd probably have to upturn the entire British Museum.
Yes,
and remove all artefacts
and give it back to where
they originally came from, because things move around the world.
If there is...
That's our legacy. The preservation, Albie, of these remarkable artefacts is a great legacy, a British legacy, and we deserve to have that.
It is a great legacy, but if there are requests from specific countries that they want specific artefacts back and they can keep them properly in good condition,
I will cut you some slack,
then
Albie.
they should be returned.
I will give you that if there is clear evidence that something was stolen or pillaged, then I will accept that. But I'm really worried about the precedent this sets. There will be siren calls from wokists to send everything back and turn the British Museum into a flagship Tesco's.
Yeah, this isn't a story that you can take in isolation. We've had calls for university, libraries, museums, galleries and so on to put, warnings on certain things that may have, connotations to colonialism and so on. There is very much, and it's particularly following the Black Lives Matter movement, there is a campaign to look back on our history and to view it in a way that, from a modern framework that certainly doesn't fit with at the time. So I think while this may seem a no-brainer to return this particular, artefact to Nigeria, it fits in with a much broader conversation that we seem to be having, that the West's history is uniquely bad, uniquely evil, and that we should self-flagellate constantly.
If I don't know, a French expat had discovered an artefact during the Blitz in London, taken it back to Paris and put it in the Louvre, I think it should stay there too. Because the point is that these figures through history who rescue certain precious materials must see that legacy sustained. But what do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Blimey, a busy old hour, and we've got another hour to come. More to come. We don't do boring, not on this show. It's just after 11 o'clock. Uncancelled with Rod Little in just a moment. Can't wait for that one. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and more reaction from my panel and their nominations of Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But first, let's head over to the newsroom and Tamsin.
Thanks, Mark. Here are the latest headlines. The Chancellor has unveiled his spending plans for a new, stronger post-COVID economy, but acknowledged inflation is likely to rise further. Rishi Sunak announced that total spending will rise by £150 billion, claiming it's the largest increase in government spending this century. So what are the changes? Well, an overhaul to alcohol duty with the planned tax increase on spirits cancelled. He's also committed £24 billion for housing, with nearly half of this going towards new affordable homes, while £1.7 billion will go to infrastructure. The planned fuel duty rise will be cancelled and the universal credit taper rate will be cut by 8%.
Whilst today's budget delivers historically high levels of public spending, its success will be measured not by the billions we spend, but by the outcomes we achieve and the difference we make to people's lives. The budgets are set, the plans are in place, the task is clear. Now we must deliver, because this isn't the government's money, it's taxpayers' money.
Labour has criticised today's measures, saying there's no coherent plan and that it does nothing to address what it calls the cost of living and climate crisis. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, gave his verdict of the budget in a video from home after testing positive for COVID-19. He praised his colleagues for responding on his behalf.
But wasn't Ed Miliband at PMQs and Rachel Reeves in the budget response just brilliant? Both of them stepped up at short notice, very short notice, to absolutely call out the government for their failure on the climate crisis and to hammer the Chancellor on his smoke and mirror budget, which does nothing for working people and nothing about the cost of living crisis.
Police in Norfolk have launched an investigation after 4 men were reportedly stabbed in Norwich. 2 of the men are understood to be in a critical condition, while the other 2 suffered serious but not life-threatening injuries. 5 men have been arrested in connection with the incident. The Duchess of Cornwall has called for action to prevent violence against women. Speaking at Shameless Festival in London, the Duchess paid tribute to Sarah Everard and her family. She urged for the names of women whose lives have been brutally ended by male violence to never be forgotten. She also encouraged more men to get on board with tackling the issue to help create a violence-free world. Well, those are the headlines. Now it's back to Tonight Live and Mark.
Thanks, Tamsin. I hope you're enjoying our bulletins. I'm loving every minute of it, and we've got lots more plans for the autumn. So do tell your friends and be part of the GB News revolution. Let's change the world together. So it's now 11:05. At this point in the show, we take a look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Let's start with the Metro. And here's what they're splashing with. Cheers, Rishi, as he enjoys a couple of beers with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Rishi Sunak kept Britain's economic taps running with the biggest beer tax cut for 50 years and a £150 billion public services binge in a levelling up budget, but fears that inflation will top 4% mean no rise in living standards. The I newspaper next. Big spender Sunak takes tax burden back to the 1950s. And Reeves steps in for Starmer at the last minute after the Labour leader is forced into COVID isolation. Astonishing, isn't it? He's had both vaccines and he's got COVID. Who knew? I can't believe it. Wow. Meanwhile, The Guardian, Sunak's post-COVID plan, spend now, cut taxes later. Chancellor criticised for lack of green measures ahead of COP26 summit. Well, I don't think the Prime Minister has to worry about his audience for COP26. He has to worry about you and me, the British voters. Man held over threats to Labour deputy Rayner. This is a really terrible and worrying story. Police have arrested a man accused of making threats against the Labour deputy leader, Angela Rayner. Sources close to the deputy leader, who is away from Parliament at the moment on bereavement leave, confirmed that she was the woman concerned after Greater Manchester Police announced the arrest. A deeply, deeply concerning story. Next up, The Telegraph. Hey, big spenders. Sunak takes spending to the highest levels since the 70s as he declares that Tories are the party of public services. My goodness, that's a reinvention if ever I saw one. Meanwhile, Alistair Heath, their excellent political and economics journalist, has said the Tories' nightmare conversion to Brownism can only end in catastrophe. Always a cracking read, The Telegraph. As is the Express. Autumn budget special. Cheers. Rishi on a mission to cut taxes. Rishi Sunak revealed yesterday his moral mission to cut taxes and reduce the role of the state in people's lives. In a defining budget for the nation's future, the Chancellor declared it was time the Tories moved away from the COVID era when government was expected to have the answer to everything. Amen to that. Meanwhile, The Star, some brilliant artwork. The Hangover Part 4, shortages, bills soaring, but don't fret, Bozo and Rishi cutting beer by 3p. Teetotal Rishi Sunak announced a 3p cut in beer duty in his budget. He obviously has no idea how much a hangover costs. Great work from The Star. The Independent, Sunak faces climate backlash over budget. He makes flying cheaper despite warnings to cut UK's demand. Campaigners condemn astonishing move days before summit. Experts warn spending pledges won't improve living standards. Meanwhile, Sean O'Grady in The Independent, Plan B is starting to look unavoidable. Well, the government have been told by mandarins that so-called Plan B, it will cost the economy 18 billion quid. And I think you'll agree the cupboard is already bare. So thanks, but no thanks. The Sun newspaper, Sheeran exclusive. I ballooned to 15 stone on a diet of wine, beer and chicken wings. Well, wait a minute, beer's cheaper now, Ed. However, he says he has now given all of those things up. Ed Sheeran has told how he ballooned to almost 16 stone when he quit touring after boozing every day and gorging on fried food. He said, I love chicken wings, wine, beer, and I never exercised. But he reveals in an exclusive interview with The Sun how he has since stopped binging and shed 5 stone. Congratulations. Brilliant artist, great entertainer, and clearly returning to good health. The Times, Sunak's spending spree. Photograph of Rishi Sunak, of course, holding that notorious and famous red box. And he's obviously spending the cash, according to The Times. There will be consequences. Rishi Sunak claimed that the Conservatives are the real party of public services as he announced a budget yesterday in which the government spending will rise to its highest sustained level since before Margaret Thatcher. You do have to wonder, what would Margaret Thatcher make of this particular budget? The Mirror, the banker's budget, champagne for rich, real pain for poor. Rishi Sunak yesterday condemned millions of poor people to more misery with a budget that failed to tackle the cost of living crisis. The Chancellor gave little support to families hit by soaring energy bills, tax rises and inflation, which may rise at its fastest rate for 30 years. But Mr Sunak slashed taxes on sparkling wine and cut air passenger duty for domestic flights. Labour's Rachel Reeves said bankers on short flights sipping champagne will be cheering. There you go. There's the politics of envy for all to see. The Daily Mail, the drinks are on us. Rishi Sunak set out an extraordinary £150 billion spending spree yesterday as he vowed to spend now and cut taxes later in a strategy designed to win the next election. Some speculating that could be in 2023. Brenda in Bristol better get herself ready for that one. Well, lots more to do. Let's start with this. Yes, it's time for Uncancelled, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, a storm has erupted after Bristol Rovers manager Joey Barton said this following Rovers' recent 3-1 loss to Newport. I said to the lads during the week, the team's almost like musical chairs. Someone gets in and does well, but then gets suspended or injured. Someone gets in for a game, does well, but then has a holocaust, a nightmare, an absolute disaster. For his Holocaust analogy, he has since been criticised by Rovers supporters, Jewish leaders and the wider football community, with some calling for him to step down. But is his offence really career-endingly bad? How did he say what he said? It's all about context, isn't it? With me to investigate this is the fabulous columnist, the brilliant Rod Liddle. Hi, Rod.
Good evening.
Now, I don't think that this man, Joey Barton, has a case to answer. It might have been clumsy language, Rod, but nothing worse than that.
No, it was nothing worse than that. He was football managers and football players are people who don't always have a great grasp of the English language, and they sometimes, in an attempt to be more colourful, perhaps extend themselves further than they should. Obviously, a player having a bad game is not a holocaust. It's not really a nightmare. It's just a bad game of football. Similarly, when Alan Pardew, the former Crystal Palace and Newcastle manager, once said of a player who performed a very good tackle, he's absolutely raped him. I think we can all agree that Alan was not quite hitting the nail on the head with that. Do you know what I mean? But the problem is that Joey Barton is probably now in the biggest mess he's ever been in, because he used a word which some people think should never be used in any other context than the one in which they think it should be used in. And this is remarkable when you consider that Joey has been done for affray, for violence in a public place, for attacking a woman, he's on the charge of that, for attacking other managers, for punching his fellow teammates, and for stubbing a cigar out on one of his fellow players' eyes. And he's still employed. And I might add to that, he's also managed to take Bristol Rovers, a biggish club, straight down from League Division 1 to near the bottom of League Division 2. Now, all of that, I suggest, would make Joey Barton unfit to be a football manager. But not using the word holocaust.
The piece you wrote on this is fabulous, and you know, you are a remarkable wordsmith, a great broadcaster and journalist. He's not. I mean, he comes from humble origins. I don't think we should judge this guy for not having the most expansive vocabulary. I think we can actually judge him positively for having clearly turned his life around, an alcoholic, a substance user and a very violent past, you know, and he's a reformed character. And, you know, he's done some good things as a player in football and he has done some things as a manager too. And I think his choice of words should not be how he's judged.
I'm not absolutely convinced he's turned his life around quite. He's got another charge against him at the moment. And the trouble seems to occur every 3 or 4 months.
That's a shame.
He always pledges that he's turned his life around, but somehow his life kind of goes back onto those rails before. Now, look, it's a difficult issue. There is no question that Britain's Jewish community feel very, very beleaguered at the moment. They've had probably the 10 worst years that they could have endured. A party which they used to vote for en masse was riven with anti-Semitism. There are anti-Semitic attacks all over the place. And you kind of understand why the Jewish community is very, very touchy then. But you can't go down that route. You cannot corral the word Holocaust, which actually, of course, comes from the Greek, meaning burn everything, and it would refer to a conflagration, to a nuclear war, would refer to many, many things, other than, as it is in the dictionary, the Holocaust, which is a different thing entirely, and which is about the murder of Jewish people by Nazi Germany between 1932 and 1945. So I just think we've got to be very, very careful about this policing of language, and particularly the most important point. And the left often goes down this route, and I've also heard it said about Joey Barton in this occasion, it doesn't matter what he meant, it doesn't matter what words he used, it's what offence can be taken from them.
Yeah.
And if you judge someone on that, we really are heading towards a kind of totalitarianism. That really is chilling.
Well, I completely agree, and I'm sorry to hear that Joey Barton continues to have one or two issues, Rod, but the bottom line is that he's no wordsmith, and this is just a sort of ham-fisted bit of commentary, isn't it? I mean, this won't have been pre-prepared. He's not like Jose Mourinho, who thinks in advance about what zinger he's going to deliver at a press conference. I think it's more sort of an example of the Coleman Balls column in Private Eye, when they, on a regular basis, find ridiculous quotes from footballers and managers. He's made a mistake. But also, as you say, we've got to be free to use all language as long as the context is understood. And I think in mitigation, he has contextualised this word. Now, it's not a word I would use, so I completely agree with you. The Holocaust is one of the most horrific, if not the most horrific chapter in human history, a colossal human nightmare and tragedy. But he's actually used other words. He said it was a Holocaust, a nightmare, an absolute disaster. So in that sentence, he's placed some context on it. He didn't just say it was a Holocaust, end of. There is a famous episode of the sitcom Seinfeld, which is called The Soup Nazi. Should that be cancelled too?
Well, of course. And indeed, he didn't actually say the Holocaust. And if you look up in your dictionary, you will find, in any dictionary you look in, that Holocaust, its first meaning is a conflagration, a burning, a destruction of everything. Only as a secondary definition, and then always with a definite article, the Holocaust, does it refer to the appalling atrocities committed against Jews back in the 30s and 40s. So, yeah, he's not the brightest lad in the world, and you've got to forgive people for their slips of grammar. You really do have to do that.
Well, for his Holocaust analogy, he has actually had a response. We contacted Bristol Rovers for a comment on this story. A press conference on the issue, God, it's an issue now, Rod, is expected tomorrow. Let me see if we can get that to you very shortly in terms of what has been said. Well, no, we will bring you the latest tomorrow as and when that story develops. Rod, we're up against it on the clock, but a really brief word on COP26. You've raised a really good point, which is something that's ignored in the eco agenda, is pollution, the P word.
Oh, absolutely. And I've written about 1,200 words about this for The Sun tomorrow. This government has presided over the destruction of our environment, of Britain's environment. We have only 17% of our beaches are safe to swim on, according to a European environmental survey. Our rivers are worse than they've been for many years, and they had been improving. And last year, the water companies deposited sewage into our rivers 400,000 times. 400,000. When you add to that the runoff from agricultural land, which the government will never say a word about the farmers, when you add to it the destruction of our grouse moors, which are now held just for grouse and are moonscapes devoid of wildlife, this government has been terribly bad for our environment.
I hugely look forward to reading that piece in tomorrow's Sun, and we'll catch up in a week's time. Thank you so much, Rod Little there, a journalist, commentator and broadcaster. Now, Joey Barton did break his silence earlier today, albeit in bizarre fashion. Rather than a carefully worded statement, Barton took to Twitter to quote a passage from the Persian poet Rumi. The lines are from A Great Wagon, which explores concepts of non-judgment. Here we go. He tweeted a picture with the lines, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about." Well, we contacted Bristol Rovers for comment on this story. I haven't got a clue what that means, and I'll spend the ad break trying to process it. But coming up, why is Ash Sarkar in Albi Amancona's crosshairs? We'll reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union jackass. But next, in the Media Buzz, we'll be showing Japan's latest invention and playing a great British game, and it's called Real or Surreal. That's right, we'll have some fun before the end of the show. Lots of talking points, and I'm going to get to your emails next, but first the weather.
Hello again. More wet weather, I'm afraid, in some parts of the UK, with the risk of flooding for parts of northern England and southern Scotland. Very mild across the board, with this southwesterly wind bringing subtropical humidity and a lot of moisture. And that moisture is being dumped across the hills of southern Scotland and northwest England as this weather front stalls through the next 24 hours. So more wet weather on the way, on top of what we've already seen through the last 12 to 24 hours. And in some parts of southern Scotland and Cumbria, more than 100 millimetres of rainfall expected by the end of Thursday, leading to a serious risk of flooding in these areas. Elsewhere, drier, but very mild still, with this strong southwesterly wind. Some showers into the northwest of Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland as we start off the day on Thursday. Drier to the southeast, with some sunny spells coming through, but the rain continues for southern and increasingly eastern Scotland, also for northern England, Wales, and increasingly the southwest through Thursday afternoon, that wet weather pushing in. Another mild day to come, nevertheless, and later Thursday, the focus for the heaviest rain increasingly across Wales and the southwest, particularly over the higher ground, where again there could be some disruption and some localised flooding by the end of Friday. On Friday, a wet start to the day with areas of rain or showers across much of the west of the UK, but Northern Ireland starts off bright with some sunshine first thing. Also bright skies for East Anglia and the southeast as we begin Friday. But this area of cloud and rain is finally making some progress east across the country. It breaks up into showers, still some heavy downpours about in places during the morning on Friday, before eventually something a bit drier and brighter arrives from the west. But it doesn't last. This weekend stays highly unsettled with further rain or showers, some strong winds at times as well, and turning colder.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Should looted artefacts in British museums and seats of higher education go back to their country of origin? It was the subject of a very fantastic debate that I had with my panel tonight. And I've received an email from Joseph who says, "Dear Mark, as someone from Nigeria, I'm torn about this. The level of corruption in the country is so huge that it makes what's going on here, like the test and trace scandal, seem like child's play. There's nothing stopping an official flinging it for 12 pieces of silver. There is institutional failure. Boko Haram insecurity, all sorts. In short, it should not go back. That's the view of Joseph. Meanwhile, on Jerry Barton referring to a bad football performance as a Holocaust, Howard has said, Mark, it was an outrageous thing to say. It's symptomatic of the superlativizing of language. By the way, that's a lovely word, which I think you've just invented, Howard. And I think I sort of said correctly. I hope so. But what you're saying is that where in any context people feel they have to use the most extreme language, even if the reality is quite mild. It's ridiculous to use the word Holocaust for a person who has a bad game of football. How about calling the next bad performance a Hiroshima or a Grenfell Tower? By the way, the logical conclusion of what Rod Liddell is saying is language anarchy, where any analogy can be made regardless of how proportionate it is. He used other analogies, why not stick with those? Interesting stuff. And Declan said Joey Barton would be a great guest to interview. Well, we're going to put a bid in because I think he's certainly a troubled and complex man, but a very interesting human being that's been on quite the journey. So that's a great shout. In fact, anybody that you think that I should interview, do drop me a line and let me know. Give me your suggestions. It could be well-known people or perhaps people that don't enjoy the media spotlight, but whose story should be heard. Do let me know. mark@gbnews.uk. So still with me, my excellent panel, Emily Carver, Albie Amancona and Amy Nicol. Harry Enfield is a British comedy icon thanks to creations like Kevin the Teenager, The Slobs, Tim Nice But Dim, and of course these guys.
This is the life, eh? Hey! Hey! Do you want to fight or something?
Genius. But Liverpool-born bus driver Anthony Ryan didn't see the funny side. He claimed he felt insulted when Margaret Robertson, his boss at the Shetland-based coach hire service R. Robertson and Son, told him to calm down, calm down. After the incident, Anthony claimed he felt so insulted and disgusted that he was, quote, in no frame of mind to work. He was fired in January for unauthorised absence and inappropriate conduct. In response, he took the company to a tribunal. He didn't sue Britain. But in a rare instance of common sense prevailing, he lost his case with a panel ruling that whilst the comments were unprofessional and uncalled for, he was not targeted for his English national origin. So I guess now we can add Harry Enfield to a list of offensive and cancelled sitcoms, along with Little Britain, Come Fly With Me and Fawlty Towers. What do we think? Amy, is this PC gone too far?
That was a big old jump you did there. So man loses job, feels quite upset about it, so decides he's going to try his best to get some money and take his employer to court and then mention this as an afterthought, I think. So I don't know if that one individual case means people want to cancel Harry Enfield. Not sure.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is that it will make people think twice in the workplace about, you know, using a catchphrase from a TV show.
He lost.
Yes, but
they said all is fine.
The fact that he lobbied the complaint, the fact that it went to tribunal tells you how everyone is now walking on eggshells.
I think that the fact that it got thrown out, and it was an afterthought anyway. He just said in the end, like I think he was kind of losing the case a bit, and his lawyer was like, OK, well, how about this?
I mean, is
the
it
fact
offensive?
that he would even suggest that could be a way to sort of, you know,
well, I suppose
get out of it.
If you're picking on someone for their regional accent, I mean, why does it make it OK if it's just Northern England rather than somewhere abroad?
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, in my office, we all have different regional accents and we make fun of each other. It's just a way of communicating with each other. When did we get so uptight?
I don't think we have.
I've been, you know, made fun of for, you know, my accent, maybe being a little bit posh or whatever, and you just get on with it. You know, it can happen both ways.
I understand your sort of stout defence of this, but I think this is the direction of travel. I think many people watching will feel that they're not allowed to do banter in the workplace anymore.
I think there's plenty of banter in the workplace. I mean, I have a boyfriend from Huddersfield and I get him to say rainbow just because it's quite funny.
Right.
Like, it's fine. Nobody wants to cancel doing Northern accents.
How does he say rainbow?
Rainbow.
Oh, can you not do that? Excuse me, that's very triggering. I don't think I'm in a good mind to do the rest of the show now because you've used a regional accent. Albie, what do you reckon?
I think it speaks to a much wider problem in society that I've noticed, especially since I've been to university, that people just seem to be hypersensitive nowadays to things which really aren't that offensive. And there are really serious issues of hate crime. Transgender hate crime has gone up by 210%, for example. Now, this was not a hate crime. Imitating a northern accent is not a hate crime. It shouldn't be being used as a reason to try and get money if you get fired. It's just, in my opinion, a little bit ridiculous.
But why isn't it? We have so many protected minorities, hate speech laws, hate crime laws, as you said, non-crime hate incidents. Why shouldn't regional accents be, you know, a protected minority? That's the way we're going with all this legislation and with all this, you know, workplace
No, Emily, I disagree.
No, I'm sorry, but we've taken it so far that there is no limit.
No, I mean,
who can be
earlier...
offended and for why.
Earlier on, when we were talking about the Australian football player who had just come out, one of the viewers said that he'd seen a homophobic attack, in Birmingham. That's very different. That is a hate crime. That's very different to people getting upset about imitating northern accents.
No,
and that's why.
What I'm saying is
why there is hate speech and hate crime legislation.
Yes, but thin end of the wedge, I think, is where Emily's going with this.
The two.
Yeah, no. It's not a case of conflating. It's a case of thinking it through. Thinking if we create, you know, an offence culture, it will lead to more and more minorities or so on people. It could be regional accents, people with regional accents, and it creates a sort of culture whereby if you're offended by anything, you can put forward a case to make that case. And we've seen it time and time again. I'm not talking about a man being beaten up in the street for being homosexual. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people using the law to benefit. We've seen with hate speech legislation, for example, emos, goths and so on have tried to use that hate crime legislation to say that they're a protected minority as well. This is just the direction of travel.
But that's very...
And it's quite
But it doesn't have to be the direction of travel. I think we just need to really control these situations much better. I do not think the logical extent of having anti-hate legislation is people getting upset if people imitate northern accents.
Well, I would get rid of anti-hate
I guarantee you there will be some
altogether.
on the woke left that would say that deploying or impersonating somebody from a different region of the country is hate speech.
They might say that, but clearly they'd be wrong.
But why? Based on your judgment?
Based on the fact...
Why?
Well, because there aren't a huge amount of hate crimes. I'm not aware of any hate crimes against people from the north. There are lots of hate crimes against people from ethnic minorities, religious minorities, and also from the LGBT+ community. And that's why that legislation exists. And people are exploiting it for gains, and I think that's totally wrong, and we should all agree
that demonstrates
that's
a flaw in hate crime legislation. I think that it's strange that a conservative...
So we should just get rid of it?
Well, can you make jokes about a Scottish...
A crime is a crime.
Can you make jokes about a Scottish colleague being a heavy drinker? Or, you know, somebody from... I mean, in Ireland, for example, my dad's from Cavan, and the joke was that Cavan men are really, like, ungenerous. They're really tight with their money. I mean, is that a hate crime? Where does this end?
I don't personally think that is a hate crime. But if someone takes offence to something, it's good that in tribunals these cases get thrown out of court.
And that's the point.
If I punch you in the face, it's a crime, right? The fact that you may be from a minority does not necessarily... It's still, I've punched you in the face, right? The law should take that into account. I think when you bring in minority, I think that this is the problem with hate crime, that it can be used so much, and it actually negates the individuals. You understand that, like, hate crime legislation has been so abused in this country that it's just literally means nothing.
I mean,
and
what's the takeaway value of this story is that although the tribunal, this allegation was not successful, rejected by the tribunal, they had to consider the fact that this man felt he was unable to pursue his duties because somebody had teased him about his Liverpool accent. And this reflects the current world that we live in. And people are afraid to make a joke at work now, afraid to have banter for fear of getting in trouble.
And that is not a world which I enjoy living in, to be honest, which is why it's so important to have conversations like this. But I will say again, there is a distinction between real hate crimes and people manipulating legislation for their own personal gains. And I don't...
Financial gains.
Financial gains, exactly. And that's what we need to be clear about.
But it is Orwellian, because you don't know what someone's motivation is behind their actions.
So what do you think this guy's motivation was?
Well, I'm not talking about this guy necessarily. I'm talking in general in terms of hate crime.
And of course,
it is very hard to know what someone's motivation for committing a crime is, right? You know,
but
no one knows
sometimes
what's
it's very
inside
clear.
someone's-
So you brought up
someone's
the example
perspective.
of emo goth, that being a protected characteristic they wanted to be, and kind of alluding to that might be a bit ridiculous. But I think that was probably in a response to the murder of the girl Sophie. Her surname has completely escaped me. She was literally murdered because of the way she dressed.
But you can't legislate on the back of.
But that was a hate crime,
freak
wasn't
incident.
it? That was a hate crime.
Well, I think that I think hate crime as a law is problematic.
It can be misused.
Because it requires a bureaucrat to interpret why
you did something. A crime is a crime. If I punch you, it's a crime, regardless of my motivation. And I think that's where the law should end.
And we've now seen that the police, and it's been a criticism of one chief police commissioner, saying that the police are now spending so much time pursuing hate crime and ignoring real crime.
But then the crime wouldn't have happened if the person didn't have that characteristic. So that's what.
No, but you don't actually fundamentally know that, and it's very hard to legislate for that because at the end of the day, you don't know what someone's motivation is inside their mind.
But if someone is not smashing the drink over the head of a straight couple, but they are doing it to a gay couple, what do you think their motivation is?
Why does it make it worse to punch someone in the face?
It's not that it's worse, I'm just asking a question. What do you think their motivation is in that scenario? If they're not doing it to a straight couple, but they're doing it to a gay couple, what do you think their motivation is?
But I'm asking you why you think that is worse than
I just said I don't think it's worse. I'm just asking,
so why is it
in that situation, what do you think the person's motivation is if they're doing it to a gay couple, but not a straight couple?
Well, they may well be a homophobe, of course.
I think they probably are a homophobe.
I'm not saying that they're not a homophobe.
Right, but you were arguing before that we can't decipher
in the eyes of
what
the
the
law,
motive of someone's crime is, but in that specific instance, I think I would argue that you can.
And I'm arguing that that is a crime.
It is a crime.
The couple are
And what is not open to debate is that someone's been punched in the face.
Exactly.
But what is open to debate is the interpretation of why, and that's proved to be problematic in case after case after case.
There are problematic pieces of legislation everywhere, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should scrap every single piece of problematic legislation. All I'm saying is, I'm not denying that there aren't any problems with anti-hate legislation. I'm just saying I do think that there are some very clear examples, like the one I've just set out, where I think you can confidently say the motivation behind that crime was hate because of homophobia or racism or whatever.
And I can understand
it's like
why
making an emotion illegal.
Well, the
Hate.
crime
You
wouldn't
can't
have
stop
happened.
The crime wouldn't have happened. That's the point.
You can't make an emotion illegal.
But the crime wouldn't have happened. That's the point that I'm trying to make.
But a crime wouldn't happen if I didn't hate my neighbour down the road, right? And I, punctured his tyre. There are motivations for every crime.
We're not going to agree on this, are we?
No, but I can see, Albie, your point that if somebody goes out to attack someone, or perhaps even looking for somebody gay to attack, then many viewers, much of the public, perhaps the majority, would think that if that's what you're up to, then a special category of crime must be established, which is, I guess, what hate crimes are all about. And I'm certainly sympathetic to that point of view. But what do you think, Mark at GBNews.uk? I suppose the principle is it's on paper quite a good idea, but the execution is not without its issues. So many emails coming in on this and many other subjects. Harry Enfield didn't create any characters or anything funny. All his material was written by Paul Whitehouse. There you go, that's Tom. Andrew Davies, calm down, calm down. Oh dear, Andrew does not agree with some of our panel on that one. And who else is this? This is a name, it's an email anonymous one, but it says, I'm a Scouser. It doesn't bother me people saying calm down. In fact, it's quite funny. Tell everyone else to get a life. Right. Now, maternity units are seeing a worrying surge in so-called sumo babies, according to The Sun. An exclusive investigation by the paper found that a total of 282 infants have been born in the past 4 years that tipped the scales at 12 pounds. But the ONS reported there were 32 babies who weighed in at a stone or heavier, which experts are partly blaming the obesity crisis for. The National Obesity Forum's Tam Fry said in response to this data, it's a disgrace that over half of women enter pregnancy at an unhealthy weight. Thousands are ignorant that a healthy weight at booking in is vital to giving their child the best start. Well, Amy, you've had a baby. How many children do you have?
Only the one.
Just the one. Well, it's worrying, isn't it? And I guess it tells you the poor state of public health in this country.
No, I disagree. I have a strong opinion on this. I was telling Emily outside, she was a bit confused. So basically, I believe these babies are huge because we leave them in too long. Literally, it is so hard to get an induction on time in this country, and babies getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they need to be taken
They're getting
out.
bigger because we've got an obesity crisis.
We leave them in too much. And that's why it says partially down to the obesity crisis, right? The baby's just going to get bigger and bigger.
We've had term pregnancies since the beginning of time.
No.
And we didn't have obese babies.
When my mother had her children, they would give you a lot more help when you had your baby. You get 2 weeks in the hospital, help, blah, blah. It's changed so much. And now all they want to do is have the cheapest possible way of giving birth. And normally they encourage a natural birth and they leave the baby in as long as possible so you have a natural
But what we're looking
delivery.
at is the number of overweight women that are going
We're looking
into
at
labour.
overweight babies. And they
How do they get overweight?
Because they're left in too long.
Are you denying the obesity crisis in this country?
partially.
In which over 60% of people are overweight or obese?
This subject is nothing to do with the obesity crisis. Partially. Maybe 1/10.
Well,
Maybe
you've
a
got
few
a
of
huge
those
growing
babies are bigger.
problem, which is diabetes,
Babies-
gestational diabetes, which is diabetes provoked by pregnancy, which has huge health implications for the unborn child.
I believe gestational diabetes is only partially linked to diet anyway. It's normally a hormonal
Well, it's
driven.
another symptom of metabolic syndrome, which is provoked by becoming pregnant.
It's provoked by becoming pregnant.
Yes, because when women
I don't
become
think
pregnant,
women have to be
they gain
necessarily
body fat,
overweight to have
and it can
gestational
have a
diabetes.
metabolic response.
Look, I'm just
So we
saying,
don't have a fat
all
problem
I
in this
would-
country.
All I would love...
You literally think it's the timing of birth.
Yes, I do. And I also...
Well, you're up a gum tree.
In this society also...
I mean, I'm scratching my head. Is this real?
Right, so I always think about women that I know that have given birth in the last 5 years. Babies are getting bigger. We are getting more uncomfortable. We're getting more disfigured from giving birth. And we also have a culture where we discourage women from having caesareans, which I think is absolutely bizarre. Because if the medical advancement is there, we could save people a lot of distress and discomfort and lifelong problems by just encouraging caesareans.
But encouraging caesareans?
Yes.
I mean, we have unevolved as a species to that extent that we now have to cut the baby out after centuries, millennia of natural births.
No.
And we're getting more sophisticated
We've
as a society.
advanced in medicine.
That's
to the
progress,
point-
is it? Slicing a baby
I
out.
can tell you've never had to give
Because
birth
we're so
naturally.
fat.
I can really, really tell. Because I
But
think
I'm
if
really
men
worried
were giving
about
birth,
it. That's
we'd
why I
have more
take this
caesareans.
seriously. Because we're obese.
I take women's health very seriously as well, which is why I would love it if we could advance a little bit more, get the babies out quicker, and all have caesareans.
This is total denial. I'm shocked.
Gosh, I really
not much,
don't want to have
not much
cesarean.
shocks me.
Why? Honestly, you do.
No, I really wouldn't want one. I wouldn't want to go under the knife. I'd like to have it naturally.
That shows
So
you
do you
never have.
accept? Do you accept?
I'll disagree.
Do you accept the connection that babies are fatter because they stay in longer?
Well, I didn't know this. I mean, I'm sure there are babies that are being kept in the womb
Well,
too
look,
long.
I'm no
think that
gynecologist.
a lot of mothers are probably a bit fat, yes.
Well, what I will
my
do is
God.
I will certainly I will give it to Amy, who of course is a very good friend of mine. That you've had a baby, I haven't, and in that I do defer to you. And look, it's all about opinions on this show. So if you agree with Amy that the bun is in the oven for too long.
You didn't expect me to say that, did you?
No, I didn't. But look, it is all
I
about
love
opinions.
I promise
And
you.
you
look
know
into
what?
it.
You might be right, I might be wrong, that happens occasionally. Now, how about this? And we can all unite around this story. A Japanese startup has developed a real-life hover bike. The X Turismo Limited Edition was manufactured by the Tokyo-based Mitsubishi-backed ALI Technologies. It can fly for 40 minutes at speeds of up to 62 miles an hour. Wouldn't it be great to have a go on one of those? But only those with deep pockets can afford it. It will set you back almost £500,000. So with the lines between science fiction and reality becoming increasingly blurred, my team and I thought we would play a game of real or surreal. That's right, real or surreal. I'm going to show our panel and you at home a bunch of futuristic inventions, and all you've got to do is tell me if they're real or just a surreal invention of Hollywood. So here's your first invention. A car that can drive on water. Take a look. Real or surreal? A car that drives on water.
Well, it has to be real, doesn't it? Because it's a photograph.
It could be doctored.
I think this one's
but
surreal.
Okay.
Well, it could be a still from a movie, or it might be a real car in action.
Okay. What do you think, Albie?
I'm really torn on this one. I mean, it does look like there's a hull, like the hull of a boat on the bottom of that car, but it could just be a picture from a film. I'm going to go with real. I hope I'm not wrong, but I'm going to go with real.
Yeah, I think it's surreal, this one.
OK, and you're saying it's surreal. You're not having it at all. So Amy and Albie think it's real and Emily not. Let's reveal the truth. There you go. That is a car boat. And what a lovely bit of kit that is. What a great way to cut through the traffic.
So it's real?
No bus lanes there.
It is.
Where is it?
It is real indeed.
It
Three
looks like
pals in
landing.
Egypt created this floating car, seen here wowing landlubbers on a voyage in June using local Japanese technology. If you fancy strapping in and setting sail, the vehicle will set you back a hefty £32,400. OK, how about this one? Real or surreal? Glasses that see for the blind. That's right, you're a blind person. You put your glasses on, and now you can see. Certainly wishful thinking, isn't it, Albie?
I think it's surreal.
Yeah, surreal.
I feel like we would have heard about this. It would have been big news if this was real. Don't you
And more
agree?
people with sight issues
Exactly.
would be wearing them.
Yeah, there would be no one blind.
Yeah.
So you're all saying surreal?
Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid you are wrong. Take a look at this.
What?
Wow.
It is the Orcam My Eye, which can read aloud text from a book, smartphone or screen, or any other surface, as well as recognise faces and describe surroundings. What an invention. Truly miraculous.
Wow.
That is truly fantastic. What a development, I've got to say. OK, here's your next one.
Oh, it can tell you who people are.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I'm very
Handy.
slow on the uptake. I think I could wear those glasses anyway, because I'm not good with names.
Exactly.
OK, here's your next one. A trio of shell-shaped devices that serve as a substitute for toilet paper. There you go. Fancy shells rather than loo roll.
Hang on, so what's in the shells?
You do wonder. I'm not sure if you're supposed to sit on them.
Mm.
They look like they would be a bit cold.
I don't like the look of that at all.
Real or surreal?
I'm
Quite high up
concerned
as well.
by
I don't
this.
think I could get up.
The positioning is tricky, isn't it?
I think it could be real.
And I wonder if something shoots up your bum when you
Maybe
sit
it's
on
in
it.
a certain
lovely.
type of nightclub, maybe. Yeah, real.
I think it could be real.
Fingers
It
crossed.
sounds like maybe some environmental thing to
Gosh.
save toilet paper.
Yeah. But I feel
Well,
like we need more information.
I
on
think
how
the
it works.
team is saying surreal rather than real.
I'm going to go for real just to be
I'm saying
contrary.
real.
Could be real.
OK, well, I've got to say, I'm afraid that my pal Emily's on a losing streak. Surreal. These are an invention of the 1993 sci-fi movie Demolition Man, which stars Sylvester Stallone as a police officer who is cryogenically frozen and wakes up in 2032. Sly's character is mocked for not knowing how to use the shells when he excuses himself to the bathroom, but their purpose is never stated in the film. Your next one, a bracelet that allows you to receive phone calls through your finger. All right, so you're wearing a bracelet and then you touch your finger to your earlobe and you hear everything. What do we think? Real or surreal?
Quite Black Mirror, isn't it, that? Or
Could be a bit Black
Is it
Mirror,
just the
couldn't it?
next step of the iWatch thing?
You
Apple
do
Watch?
wonder.
Who knows?
There are those headphones which go onto the bone around your ear rather than inside your ear.
Yeah.
Have you tried those out?
No.
It's like a kind of skull headphone.
Yeah.
And
Never heard of
the sound passes through the bones in your head and actually straight into your eardrum.
Sounds really clear and good.
Yeah, have you tried those? Have you tried those gizmos?
No, I haven't. I can't.
They're quite
I would love
nifty.
to, yeah.
Well, real or surreal, what do we think?
I think it's surreal.
I think surreal.
Yeah,
I don't think we're there yet.
Oh, Emily.
I got it real.
It's real.
Oh,
What?
gosh.
Yeah, that's what I
Yes.
said.
Where did we
Oh, you
get
said real.
one?
I can't believe this.
Sorry, a great miscarriage of justice for Emily there. Emily is right. It is real.
Where is this available?
It's called the Signal.
How much is it?
John Lewis, probably. A smart strap that enables you to answer phone calls by placing your fingertip on your ear, allowing the call to be transmitted via vibrations.
Hey,
or
I want
similar
one of them
to
for
that
Christmas.
technology I was talking about. A Kickstarter to fund the device has raised over £1 million. Here's your next one, a ring that can shatter glass. Very James Bond. OK, I'll have to hurry you through this one. What do we think, real or surreal?
Real.
Real.
It's
Surreal.
I'm afraid it's surreal. The glass-shattering ring,
No.
a.k.a. the single-digit sonic agitator, is one of the many gadgets used by James Bond. Let's take a look at the legendary John Cleese as Q explains it to Piers Brosnan in Die Another Day.
One pane, unbreakable glass, one standard issue ring finger. Twist so, voila.
Brilliant stuff. Love a bit of John Cleese as well. And finally, what about this one? Self-lacing shoes. Real or surreal?
So you don't. So it just. How do you do it then? Press a button and your laces just.
I believe so.
Very clever.
I think that's the idea. You certainly don't have to lift a finger.
Okay. What do you think?
I'm going to go with real.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I'm going to go not real.
Okay, a real and a surreal.
Surely we'd go for a
casting
real
vote. Chance to
Just
recover
because I think
ground
we
now.
should be able to do that by
This
now.
is your chance to steal the game.
We shouldn't have to tie up our laces.
What'd you say, Amy?
This is what's fueling the obesity crisis. They're not even
It
doing up their
could be.
laces.
You know what? Exactly.
Those fat
Raise a damn
babies.
good point. Well, let me reveal all. Is it real or surreal? Here's the answer. It's real.
What?
Yes, indeed.
Mark, can you cancel those?
Well, they're both surreal and real. Self-lacing shoes were made famous in Back to the Future Part 2 in 1989 when Marty McFly travelled to the far-off future of 2015. And when 2015 came around, Nike developed the real thing to benefit star Michael J. Fox's Foundation for Parkinson's Research. And here's the great man trying on an actual pair.
They lace up on their own?
Yeah, see the thing?
Just brilliant stuff. So, real and surreal, so everyone gets points. Thank you to my panel for playing that, and I hope you enjoyed that one at home. After this, my panel will nominate their Greatest Britain and Union jackass. Find out why my fabulous pal Amy Nickel is struggling to mask her disdain for Jacob Rees-Mogg. See you in 2.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Sue has said I completely agree with Amy. She's absolutely right. Section every time, no pain, and you get a healthy child.
It's medical misogyny, people. You heard it here first.
There you go. I do want to say, Lorna says a natural birth allows the baby to develop strong immunity as it travels down the birth canal. This is part of the problem today that leads to the spread of viruses. The best diet you can give a baby is a natural childbirth. Well, it's all about opinions, and we've heard both. It's time now for our Greatest Britain and Union jackass with my fabulous panel. Emily, who's your Greatest Britain?
So it's Claire Fox in the House of Lords for being one of our only parliamentarians to stand up against the Coronavirus Act.
Yeah.
And she made the point very strongly that we're no longer in an emergency and therefore there should be no more emergency legislation.
Couldn't
so I'll
agree
give her
more.
top marks for that.
Well said. How about you, Albie, your greatest Briton?
Mine is not a Briton, he's an Australian, so an honorary Briton, but it is Joshua Cavallo, the very brave footballer who came out, the first professional football player in the world to do so, so congratulations.
Absolutely. Brilliant nomination, hard one to follow. Amy?
I know you're going to agree, it's Rachel Reeves. Because I think every time another member of the Labour Party gets to speak in Keir's place, it always works out for the best. And I think that... Well, we haven't got much time.
No, but she did well. She stepped into the breach and clearly left a few bruises on the face of Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, it's good for bankers on planes sipping champagne.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
OK, great shout. And then how about your Union Jackass, Emily?
So mine is Novara Media, purely for their, hypocrisy. Well, it's Carrie Wigan, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's the head of video at Novara Media. Novara Media is, of course, the left-wing media channel that got booted off YouTube for a little bit. He had previously said that censorship isn't censorship because a private company can decide to do whatever they want. And then, obviously, he was complaining and saying how it was such a travesty that Novara Media was booted off. So, yes, it's the hypocrisy of the left on cancel culture.
Fair enough, and it's good to see that they're back online now because, as we feel here at GB News, it's definitely important to have a plurality of voices. Albie, your Union Jackass.
My Union Jackass, in complete agreement with Emily, for the similar reasons as Ash Sarkar. I think she said at one point that cancel culture is social justice, and then now all of the Novara Media lot are getting annoyed because they're being cancelled. It's one rule for them and another rule for us. They wouldn't do the same for us, and I think, do you know what? They've just shown themselves to be absolute hypocrites.
Amy, a few seconds. It's a crime to rush you, but who's your Union Jackass? Jacob Rees-Mogg.
It's Jacob Rees-Mogg. You thought I was going to forget then, didn't you?
No, I forgot, then I remembered. So what's he done?
Because he's an arrogant weasel, and everybody managed to wear a mask today, but he just couldn't bring himself to, and I think he shows very demonstrably in that move his lack of empathy and compassion for all of humanity. Legend.
Well, there you go. It's been such a great show tonight. Amazing panel. All made fantastic by your emails and your company. I'll see you tomorrow at 9.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.